Chapter 416. Majestic Fox Mountain, Ghost King's Sect Headquarters. Along the way, Ghostly felt his mind was blank. Only that mysterious and indistinct girl figure, always lingering before his eyes. Just that, he clearly knew. That should be an illusion, right? Could not be. In a daze, he then realized that he had unknowingly walked back to the stone room that belonged to him. The stone door was open. Looking in from outside, he could still see the mess inside. It was the result of the inexplicable fight between him and Ghost King. He looked at the mess, was silent for a long time, slowly walked in, beside the broken table, found a chair that was still intact, and sat down in a daze. The monkey Xiao Hui ran over from the side, looked like it was still in low spirits, without a word climbed up Ghostly's shoulder, sat down, and then also in a daze. Maybe he was still worried about Tao Tai. One man, one monkey, sat like that for a long time. Not a single sound was heard. The entire stone chamber seemed unusually oppressive. At the end, suddenly Ghost Li's body moved and then stretched out his hand, pulled Xiao Hui down from his shoulder, and raised it in front of him. The monkey's three eyes blinked at the same time, looked at Ghostly. Ghostly quietly said, "Xiao Hui, what do you say I should do?" The monkey Xiao Hui did not make a sound, only looked at him. Ghostly also did not seem to mind its reply, only quietly muttered to himself, "This path, how exactly should I walk?" In the mountains, time flowed past like water. In the deepest secret place, in the mountain belly, in the huge blood pool, a strong stench of blood drifted, this strange existence, quietly hiding in the forgotten corner of the world, quietly germinating. Naturally, other than two people, Ghost King and Mr. Ghost. In the huge blood pool, it was still filled with dark red blood. Numerous bubbles occasionally rose from the depths of the blood pool, bounced up and burst on the water surface, splashing out fine blood flowers. Just like before, huge spiritual beasts were imprisoned in this blood pool. Just that other than Kuei Nyo, Yellow Bird. Right now, there were two more figures in the blood pool. One was the strange beast Tatai, who was struggling but ultimately unable to do anything. The other figure was an unusually huge monster, its head like the legendary dragon, its body almost twice as big as Kuei Nyo. Because most of it was covered in the blood water, the specific shape could not be seen clearly but from a few parts of its body protruding out of the water. One could imagine that it must be the legendary evil sect magical beast Julong. Kuei Nyo and Yellow Bird had been imprisoned for a long time, were already on the verge of death, unable to lift their spirits. The Julong also looked listless, lifeless. Only the Tao Tai, because it was just captured, its mental strength was still considered intact. From time to time it made angry roars, inciting waves in the blood water around it, clearly extremely enraged. Just that in this blood pool, there seemed to be an unusual force. Not only imprisoned the other three strange beasts, even the Tao Tai could not break free, roared and struggled, but ultimately to no avail. Other than that, in the sky above the blood pool, compared to before, there was another strange phenomenon. That mysterious and strange ancient divine object, the hidden dragon cauldron, right now was suspended in the air 50 feet above the blood pool. From the four ancient cauldron legs below the cauldron, each shot out a faint purple mixed with red light, shining down from above, shining on the four strange beasts. Looking from afar, it was obvious that in these four rays of light, there was an indistinct, rich spiritual power, forcefully sucked out from those strange beasts into the hidden dragon cauldron. And because it was continuously absorbing the almost endless spiritual power from these strange beasts, the hidden dragon cauldron's original ancient and profound appearance had already slowly started to change. The entire cauldron was enveloped by a rising auspicious air. The original ancient color was slowly fading, and replacing it was a warm, jade-like color, gradually becoming somewhat transparent. Looking at it, it almost made one think that this was the legendary celestial holy object, extraordinary and incongruous with the blood pool below it, which reeked of blood. Just that, under this celestial aura lingering on the exterior, there was still a strange place. That was the mysterious pattern on the cauldron. The four strange beasts' pictures flickered. The huge cauldron inscription that symbolized the hidden dragon cauldron itself was also slowly changing color. Only at the top of the pattern, that savage deity's face was instead dark red like blood, as if greedily absorbing the power about to come to life. Far away from the blood pool, on a high platform, Ghost King and Mr. Ghost stood side by side. Mr. Ghost was dressed in black. His entire person still seemed to be shrouded in the dark shadows. Even standing in front of him, one could not see his figure clearly. Right now, he was using a deep voice, speaking to Ghost King. That's right, the hidden dragon cauldron inscription was indeed true. When the four spirits gather, the chaos will open. Right now, the four divinities' blood formation is completed. What's left is to wait for 49 days, until the hidden dragon cauldron finishes gathering the four spirits. The power of chaos will then be enough to split heaven and earth, reopen the azure door. Then, sect head, you will be able to control the supreme celestial power of heaven and earth, invincible again. Ghost King's face was flushed, his eyes glinting, staring intently at the hidden dragon cauldron in the air, excitement unconcealable on his face. He suddenly looked up to the sky, laughed out loud. The laughter was loud and savage, carrying arrogance and stubbornness, as if he was already the ruler of the world. Just that this arrogant laughter suddenly stopped. Ghost King frowned, used his hand to gently press his chest. At the same time, the redness on his face instantly faded, a paleness, but the next moment, golden energy flashed past his face. Not long after, he had already returned to normal. Mr. Ghost stood beside, saw the changes in his expression. With his knowledge and eyesight, couldn't help but be startled, asked in surprise, "Who did you fight with? Who is that person to have such skills?" Ghost King took a deep breath. His countenance had completely returned to normal. After closing his eyes for a moment, he slowly opened his eyes. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. Coldly said, "Great Brahmin wisdom and Tai Chi Xian Xing Wei are indeed unparalleled, wondrous skills, although not as sharp as our evil sect's supernatural powers, but the after effect is long and abundant, really frightening." Mr. Ghost frowned. A strange glint flashed in his eyes, said, "It's him? Why did you fight with him for no reason?" Speaking until here, he suddenly seemed to recall something, said, "Could it be because of Tao Tai?" Ghost King snorted, but did not answer Mr. Ghost, only indifferently said, "This child's skills advance quickly. It is really unexpected. I'm afraid in the future, it may become a source of trouble. It is also very hard to say." Mr. Ghost looked deeply at Ghost King and then looked away, unhurriedly said, "Under the most urgent situation, the four divinities' blood formation is still the priority. Other matters can be avoided if possible." Ghost King nodded slightly, said, "That's right. I know the severity. Don't worry." Mr. Ghost hesitated for a moment, said, "But with Ghost Lee's unfathomable skills, in addition with the strengthening of the four divinities' blood formation's absorption of spiritual energy, the bloody scene will definitely be hard to conceal. With him here, unavoidably there will be more variables. To avoid any accidents, you better find an excuse and send him out." Ghost King was silent for a moment, said, "You are right." After speaking, he frowned slightly, turned around, clasped his hand behind his back, slowly walked out of the blood pool. Watching Ghost King's figure gradually disappearing, Mr. Ghost then slowly turned around, walked to the side of the platform, and looked down. The strange beast Tao Tai, which was still struggling with all its might, seemed to be under the double shock from the blood pool and the hidden dragon cauldron's light, gradually lost its ability to resist. Right now, it was also powerlessly lying in the blood pool, panting continuously. Watching this scene, under the black veil, Mr. Ghost slowly emitted a cold and emotionless sneer. "Ha ha! Azura door, huh?" Footsteps were heard outside the stone door, sounded rather hurried. Evidently the person was running over very hurried. Not long after, a figure appeared outside Ghost Lee's stone room. Half knelt down, loudly said, "Deputy Sect Head, Ghost King Sect Head has sent a message asking you to meet him." The voice was loud and clear, to the extent that there were faint echoes in the stone room, but there was no reply. The person was startled but did not immediately raise his head. Ghostly, in the evil sect Ghost King sect, had always been notorious for killing. Ordinary sect members rarely dared to go near him, not to mention being rude. That person then boldly raised his voice and said again, but there was still no response. He then raised his head and looked into the stone room. What greeted his eyes was a chaotic scene, but where was Ghostly and the monkey Xiao Hui, who was always with him? The man groaned, shook his head, and ran away with large strides. Right now, Ghostly was walking in the Ghost King sect's long tunnel. The monkey Xiao Hui quietly crouched on his shoulder. Ghostly looked ahead, although he could not see the end of the tunnel, but he knew very clearly the end of the tunnel was where Ghost King resided. No matter what, I can't be idling here, right, Xiao Hui? He seemed to be softly muttering to himself. And the monkey Xiao Hui was also in a daze, did not notice its master's words at all, and Ghostly did not care. A few times, there was hope, but at the last moment, it was all for naught. But as long as Bai Yao was still lying there, I cannot despair, right? He gave a low, bitter laugh. Chapter 417. I know what you are worried about. Don't worry. Wait until I find a way to cure Bai Yao. I will naturally ask him for your friend back. The monkey Xiao Hui's ears suddenly perked up and then called out twice. Ghostly smiled, but the smile did not stay on his face for long and disappeared again. He stood at the entrance of Ghost King's stone chamber. Outside the heavy stone door, that already familiar voice was heard. Ghost King sat upright on the chair. In his mind, for some reason, his daughter's figure flashed past. An extremely complicated emotion was floating in his mind. The stone door opened. Ghostly's figure appeared. You are here, Ghost King indifferently said. Yes. Ghostly slowly nodded, his voice equally indifferent. Both men were silent, as if nothing had happened between them. After a moment, Ghostly said, There is one thing I want to tell you. Say it. Ghostly indifferently said, You have already brought the sect back here, and I have also brought Tao Tai back for you. If there is nothing else in the near future, I want to go out again, see if I can find a way to save Bai Yao. Ghost King frowned, glanced at Ghostly, and at this moment, hurried footsteps were heard outside the door. That messenger ran over and was about to speak when he suddenly saw Ghostly and Ghost King talking face to face. Couldn't help, but was startled. Ghost King quietly waved his hand to that person. That person hesitated for a moment, bowed, and quietly retreated. Ghost King's eyes slowly turned to Ghostly. This young man was still quietly standing there, looking at the evil sect from top to bottom. No matter who it was standing in front of Ghost King, they would definitely be in fear and trepidation. Only he seemed to have never been afraid. Was this the man his daughter loved with all her heart? You go. Ghost King's voice suddenly seemed to have some tiredness. Ghostly silently nodded. That fight not long ago. Although both of them pretended nothing had happened, but obviously their already unfriendly relationship seemed to have drifted apart. He turned around and walked out. However, just as he was about to step out of the door, his body suddenly paused. An indescribable and strange aura came out of nowhere. It was as if he was suddenly placed in a bottomless abyss of blood, and it was difficult to breathe. It was also as if a huge wave had pressed down on him in the blink of an eye. The smell of blood was like a calamity, and it violently rumbled in his ears. Ghost Lee's expression changed. However, this strange aura was like a dream, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The surroundings quieted down and returned to normal. The Ghost King's voice rang out behind him, calm and emotionless. What's wrong? Ghostly, with his back facing him, stood there for a moment, faintly said, Nothing. After saying that, he slowly walked away. The stone door slowly closed behind him. When it completely closed with the stone wall, Ghostly suddenly swiftly turned around. A glint flashed in his eyes, staring deeply at Ghost King's stone door. His gaze was deep and difficult to understand, and seemed to be perplexed. And Ghost King in the stone chamber expressionlessly looked at that stone door for a long time, seemed to be thinking about something, but eventually still shook his head, turned and walked to the other side of the chamber, patted a few times on the stone wall. The next moment, the seemingly complete piece of stone wall actually moved to the side, revealing a secret passage that only one person could pass through. And a thick smell of blood also emanated from that secret passage. Ghost King expressionlessly walked in. The stone wall behind him slowly closed up. Somewhere in the Central Plains, thousands of miles away from the southern border, it was closer to Qingyun Hill. This place was a desolate wilderness, uninhabited. Looking at the undulating mountain range, a long river flowed past it. Based on the geographical records, this nameless mountain range belonged to the tail end of the incomparably vast Qingyun Hill mountain range, and that long river between the lofty mountains and precipitous ridges could also be considered one of the upstream tributaries of that river outside Hyang City. Just that it was, after all, far away from the Qingyun's spiritual vein, ferocious beasts roaming about, apes crying and tigers roaring. There was not a trace of celestial spirituality. Just that in this forgotten place, the tranquility was broken today. Two figures streaked across the sky, chasing one another. The person in front was shrouded in a black shadow. The person behind was a flash of gray light, both as fast as lightning. The black shadow moved up and down in the air, and suddenly fell into the desolate forest, twisting and turning. It was an extremely ingenious move. Unfortunately, the gray shadow that was chasing after him really had an unfathomable supernatural power. It countered every move and actually chased after him closely, not falling behind even a little bit. It looked like it was gradually closing in. Suddenly, the black figure in front seemed to know that for the time being he could not shake off the person behind him. In the swift, like lightning dashing, his body suddenly paused. Immediately, the black figure trembled like a nail nailed to the ground. And almost at the same time, the black figure swiftly turned around, his right hand pointed 5 times in the air, only to hear a duo sound. In this desolate forest, under the broad daylight, impressively appeared 5 spots of fire. Within the flames, there was a vague image of a ferocious skeleton. The wind whistled as it pounced towards the pursuing gray shadow. That gray figure in an instant had already reached in front of him, but he also stopped when he said to, just that he was fully focused, as if facing a formidable enemy. Obviously, he did not dare to let his guard down against these 5 spots of fire. After a moment, a cold light flowed beside the gray figure's hand. A crystal-clear, 2-headed sharp tube-shaped magical weapon appeared. As soon as this magic treasure appeared, the surrounding ground and branches were instantly covered in a layer of white frost, and the surrounding temperature instantly dropped. The 5 spots of fire came like the wind. The gray figure's magical weapon spun the air, sucked the 5 spots of fire into the magical weapon. After a moment, like fire meeting ice, the 5 spots of fire slowly dimmed down and finally extinguished, and the black light and gray air also gradually dispersed. 9 cold ice freezing thorn. It was really an incredible magical weapon, like lamenting and also like praising, but there was no anger in his tone. That black-attired man quietly said, and standing opposite him was a gray-attired old man. He was the number 2 figure of the southern border, Funxiang Valley. Shangguan Su, and the magical weapon in his hand was naturally the 9 cold ice freezing thorn that even a 9-tailed celestial fox was wary of. Shangguan Su dryly laughed twice, in a deep voice, said, "To be able to receive your demon shaman's praise, it is really not easy." This black-attired man was actually the shaman demon who escaped from the southern border's subdue devil ancient cave. Just that why did he and Shangguan Su ended up in such a situation? The shaman demon assessed Shangguan Su a few times, suddenly sighed and said, "Old friend, you and I are not just a day or 2 of friendship. Why must you still force me?" Shangguan Su indifferently said, "I've already told you my purpose. There is no other meaning. It is just that our Funxiang Valley Master would like to meet you. There are some matters that we could discuss in depth, therefore would like to invite you to Funxiang Valley. It is that simple." The shaman demon shook his head with a bitter smile, said, "That Valley Master senior brother of yours is too scheming. Although I have lived foolishly in this world, but I cannot compare to him. Besides, do you think I do not know your purpose? It is just for our shaman tribe's secrets, right?" Shangguan Su snorted, said, "It is good that you know, now that the southern border is in a mess, the 5 tribes in chaos, We need Funxiang Valley to come out and preside over the big plan. Moreover, we do not have any malicious intentions. No matter what, we are also much better than those vicious demon beasts, right? The shaman demon looked at him deeply, said, "The secret of the shaman tribe Heaven Fire, I really do not know. Old friend, on account of our many years of friendship, please let me go." Shang Wansu shook his head, said, "I also have no choice." After speaking, the 9 cold ice condensing thorn in his hand slowly drew a semicircle in the air, emitting a biting cold air, again pressed towards the shaman demon. The shaman demon stood motionless, not knowing if it was because he already understood that he could not escape Shang Wansu's pursuit, gave up the effort, only indifferently said, "Old friend, this world is so big. Everything changes without reason. That day, I did not follow Goddess and Big Brother to the Netherworld, was because I wanted to make use of my remaining years, to go to Central Plains again, to see the various forms of this world. Don't tell me even this small request. You're also not willing to give me a chance?" Shang Wansu snorted, ignored him, clearly did not believe his words at all. Right now, he was already 3 chi from the shaman demon, but at this moment, his countenance suddenly changed, both eyes staring at the ground. In the daytime, the sunlight shone down. The shaman demon's body looked like it was floating, but there was no sign of it, and the body slightly trembled with the wind, looked like it was about to float up. Shang Wansu moved. In a blink, he was already before the shaman demon. The 9 cold ice condensing thorns struck down. Immediately, a cold light with unstoppable force split the shaman demon into 2 from the middle, just that these 2 halves instantly turned into black smoke, swiftly dispersed in the air. Shang Wansu was so angry that his face turned pale. He knew that he had inadvertently fallen into the shaman demon's diversionary tactic again. Fiercely stamping his feet, he leapt up, leapt into the air, surveyed his surroundings, saw a black figure escaping far away, heading towards the north. Without speaking, he turned into a gray light, directly pursued. Chapter 4:18. At the foot of Qing Yun Hill, the sky was high and the clouds were light. Standing at the foot of the hill and looking up, a stretch of azure blue, a gentle breeze blew over, invigorating one's spirit. Anan watched for a long while. There was no one around. Naturally, no one would discover this secluded foot of the hill. There was such a beautiful girl, quietly watching the sky. The cool breeze blew over. Her shoulder-length hair gently fluttered, brushed past her slightly thin face. Master Sheiwe's advice before she left incessantly resounded beside her ears. That year from Daoxian's senior brother and Wan's senior brother's conversation, we know that the generations of Qing Yun's sect head reverend, when they were still conscious, would tell this secret to the next generation of disciples, and the generations of ancestors passed down their will. For the sake of Qing Yun's sect's reputation and the world's common people, in order to avoid more killings, when a last resort, the succeeding disciples can kill their teachers. This time, Daoxian's senior brother, for some reason, did not tell Xiao Yikai this secret. To me, there are only 2 reasons. 1. Daoxian's senior brother, before he made up his mind to tell Xiao Yikai this secret, he was already devoured by the evil spirit of Zhu Xian ancient sword. 2. Daoxian's senior brother was confident of his high skills. Especially in the fierce battle 10 years ago, he used the Zhu Xian sword formation, but did not see the evil spirit devouring him. Therefore, he thought this time he could also withstand it. When the real evil spirit devoured him, it was already too late. Just that even though the situation is like this, but we as Qing Yun disciples, no matter what, we cannot stay out of it. Tian Bui disappeared. Su Junior's sister is in a mess. Only I can make this difficult decision. I only hope that everything will end on the mountain. You do not have to participate in it, but if they're really discovered at the foot of the mountain, you will also have to do your best to shoulder this great responsibility. Qing Yun generations of ancestors have spirits, will definitely protect you and me, teacher and disciple. Anan slowly opened her eyes, breathed deeply. Turning her head to look, the majestic mountains behind her, tall and straight, the distant mountains rising and falling, steep cliffs towering. Everywhere was graceful. Everywhere was a scenery. Towering into the clouds, towering over the world. It was for Qing Yun. A faint and warm smile slowly surfaced at the corner of her mouth. This mountain range was, after all, the place where she grew up, had her respected teachers, close senior and junior sisters, and also what she once had, memories. She turned around and walked away. Her white clothes were like snow, fluttering in the wind. Heaven and earth were so vast, the blue dome of heaven boundless. Even if she was a peerless beauty, a matchless hero, perhaps she was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. Speaking of which, this was the first time that he had come down from the mountain under the orders of his teacher, but he didn't have a clear place to go. Although he had a heavy responsibility, he did not know where to go to complete this task. Thinking about it, it was a bit ridiculous. Tianya quietly held in his hand, but there was no familiar feeling. It should be said that it had long become a part of his body. The faint blue light was already withdrawn into the scabbard. A man and a sword walked over leisurely. Where should I go? The world was so vast. Before her was a three-way fork. Lu Sweki stopped. It was not that she did not know the way. Among the Qingyun sect disciples, she was considered the one who went down the mountain more frequently. The flat road in front of her, she had walked on it countless times. It was the most convenient way out of Qingyun Hill, directly leading to the largest city at the foot of Qingyun Hill, Heyang City. And the other fork road looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. Wild grass overgrown, only a section near the fork was faintly visible. Looking at it from afar, the further places had long been submerged by the wild grass. Actually, this kind of small mountain path, there were many of them coming down from Qingyun Hill. Many of them were made by the villagers who lived near the foot of Qingyun Hill to make a living by going up the mountain to chop firewood or pick wild fruits. There were also many roads. Due to various reasons, over the years, it had also become this abandoned. This road, who knew where it would lead to, and who would remember, who had walked on it before? Lu Sweki shook her head slightly, smiled bitterly in her heart. Ever since she returned from southern border, separated from that person till now, her state of mind had really changed a lot. She gently shook her head, wanted to throw away this thought, and was about to walk on the main road again. At this time, from the other end of the main road, villagers in twos and threes, old and young, looking at their clothing, most of them were carrying axes, hemp ropes, and carrying poles. Seemed like they were the woodcutters from the nearby villages who were going up the mountain to chop firewood. When they neared, these woodcutters saw Lu Sweki. All of them made way, their faces revealing a respectful expression. Qingyun sect disciples within the radius of several hundred miles were already revered by the people. Moreover, Lu Sweki's peerless beauty, floating like a fairy, made it even more so that no one dared to stare at her. Lu Sweki stopped, nodded slightly to them, considered returning the greeting, and was about to leave. At this moment, suddenly one of the old woodcutters, whose hair had already turned white but was still spirited, seemed very enthusiastic, laughed and said, "Miss, you don't know the way?" Lu Sweki's body paused slightly, stopped, her eyes turned, glanced at that old woodcutter's, hesitated for a moment, gently shook her head. Just that before she could speak, that enthusiastic old woodcutters had already said, "I know you Qingyun sect cultivators are powerful. Many times you fly here and there, but to talk about the road under your feet, sometimes you are not as familiar as us country people." The few woodcutters heard it. All laughed. Lu Sweki looked at their kind faces. For some reason her heart suddenly felt warm. The steps that she was about to take once again stopped. The old woodcutters laughed and said, "That main road in front of you, it leads to Heyang City in the south. That is the most bustling place within 100 miles. Once you reach there, it will be much easier to go to other places." Speaking, he again pointed to that abandoned path, said, "Don't go that road. Many years ago, it was also a bustling village, but now it is all destroyed. No one is left." Lu Sweki smiled and said, "I understand. Many thanks, sir." The old woodcutters waved his hand, laughed twice, and continued to walk towards Qingyun Hill. At the same time, a slightly younger woodcutters beside him sighed and said, "Originally, there was a temple in that village. Heard it was quite efficacious. More than 10 years ago, my wife and I went there to pray to Bodhisattva, and in the end, we did have a child. Unfortunately, it is also gone now." The old woodcutters nodded and said, "Yes, I also remember. It is really a pity that the temple is gone." Their voices gradually turned low. Their figures also gradually disappeared into the forest. In the distant breeze, there seemed to be their cheerful and forthright laughter. Lusweki turned around. The smile on her face was still there, for some reason. Her mood seemed to be much better. With a smile, she lifted her head and walked towards the main road. Her footsteps were originally brisk, but for some reason, her footsteps suddenly slowed down. Her delicate brows slightly frowned. Deep in her heart, something important seemed to have flashed past, but for a moment she did not grasp it. Deep in her memories, something seemed to be quietly awakening. She stood still, quietly and motionless. The scene just now quickly replayed in her mind. The woodcutter's words once again resounded. "Don't go that road. Many years ago it was also a bustling village, but now it is all destroyed. There is no one. Originally there was a temple in that village. I heard that it was very effective." Lusweki's whole body suddenly trembled. After a moment, she slowly turned around. Once again looked at the path overgrown with weeds, as if it had been submerged in the afterimage of time. How many things can change in 10 years? Appearance, mood, or hatred. No one can understand others, and sometimes, even oneself can't really understand. However, this was the only path that had truly changed, because there is no road here. The dense growth of weeds, year after year, covered the past history, witnessed the ruthlessness of time, until a lonely white figure quietly approached the dusty place. In the weeds, you can still vaguely see the ruins. In the breeze blowing in the face, there is no longer the bloody smell of the past. There's only the slightly fresh fragrance of weeds. Walking past one after another broken doors, looking at the collapsed stone steps and walls covered by moss, those smiles and smiles that she once had in her lifetime, the happiness that she once had all dispersed with the wind? Lusweki's face turned slightly pale. Her slender and delicate hands held Tianya even tighter. In this abandoned village, there seemed to be someone's gaze quietly watching her. She even had a feeling that she couldn't breathe. But she never stopped, quietly walked like that, walked past every house. Once upon a time, who would still remember the people here? Until she saw that dilapidated temple. Different from the surrounding environment, around that dilapidated temple, for some reason, not a single blade of grass grew. Saying it was a house, it would be more appropriate to say it was a few pillars, just that on the remaining broken stones on the ground, there was still a vague image of a deity. Then she could tell where this used to be. Lusweki slowly walked over. No weeds, no moss. Everything here seemed out of place. Not knowing why, even such tenacious weeds were unwilling to enter this place. Or could it be that the resentment and grudges all gathered at this place? Then in the dead of the night, would there be someone crying and whispering, talking about the past? Lusweki suddenly turned around, not knowing when. Her eyes were glistening with tears. Grass Temple Village. This was a place that had long been forgotten. She quietly sat at the corner, motionless, as if quietly listening to something, or perhaps feeling something. A wind blew over from afar, blowing her black hair, gently fluttering. The sun rose and set, day and night, day and night, day and night, day and night, the stars changing. The white clouds in the firmament were like old dogs, disappearing like shooting stars, time like water. In the end it left resolutely, never stopping for anyone. In the weeds far away, not knowing where the cries of insects were heard, other than the sound of the wind, this was the most lively sound here. Maybe, in another 10 years, this place would once again become a flourishing place? Or perhaps, it would still be the same as before. Who would care? 3 days, Lusweki in this desolate place, quietly sat for 3 days, the constraints of the world, heavy responsibilities and great responsibilities, but it turned out that only in such a place, there was a place to escape. Quietly, he would just treat it as indulging himself and hiding. Just that, she still had to leave. Her white clothes swayed, quietly came, Lusweki's figure, reappeared, left that dilapidated little temple, again walked past the small house doors under the dilapidated walls. For some reason, her gaze seemed to contain a reluctance to part with this place. In the distant horizon, the clouds floated indistinctly like being blown by the wind. A white line quietly streaked across the sky. Lou Swecki took a last look at these houses, turned and left, never looking back again. That white clothes fluttering figure quietly walked away in the weeds. Chapter 419. Above the firmament, the white clouds were still silent. Just that from the cloud layer, suddenly a swift faint light swept out, silently but swiftly, bringing along a few lingering white clouds on the cloud layer, dispersing in the air. Very soon, this light landed in this abandoned village. Z. The familiar monkey cries. The three-eyed, gray monkey jumped to the ground, looked around. Clearly coming to this wilderness place was far more enjoyable than in the mountain. Not long after, the monkey jumped away and burrowed into the dense weeds. It was unknown where it went to play. Ghostly quietly stood in the middle of this village, his face expressionless, other than in his eyes, that unconcealable weariness and pain. He stared blankly at everything around him, slowly turned. The once familiar place, everything slowly surfaced in his mind. Even the wind blowing from afar carried a trace of familiarity, the fragrance of his hometown. And far behind him, behind the dense wild grass, that white and slightly lonely figure finally disappeared into the distance. He slowly walked over. The things that once imprinted in Lou Swecki's eyes also appeared before him. The dilapidated walls, mossy stone steps, and finally, that dilapidated temple. Just that he did not walk over. He only stared at the temple from afar. In a daze, it was there that changed a young man's life. He stood for a long time, also watched for a long time, but in the end did not go over after a long time. He turned, stepped over the weeds on the ground, barely able to distinguish the distance between the houses, and walked on the small path. He walked very slowly, as if each step was extremely heavy. Until he reached the third house in the second row, he stopped. This was a house no different from the other dilapidated houses. The same broken doors and windows, the same deserted and abandoned. Even the moss on the stone steps seemed to be more than the other houses. Ghost Lee's lips started to tremble lightly. For the first time in many years, he could not hold back the tears in his eyes. Slowly, he knelt down in front of the little house, buried his head deep in the ground in front of the little house, in the wild grass. Indistinctly in the wind was a choked and struggling whisper, "Father, Mother." Hyang City. After the demon beast catastrophe, Hyang City's vitality was greatly damaged. There were countless casualties, but after the catastrophe, the days had to go on. The people who entered the city from all directions, as well as the people who fled back home, gradually made the ancient city bustle with activity. On the busiest street, the best restaurant in Sunstream City was still the Shanghai Garden where Shaw Danon stayed when he first came down from the mountain. Although, because of the calamity, the noise was much quieter than 10 years ago. After all, people escaped from death. It was rare for them to have the mood to eat and drink here. However, on this day, a strange guest came to the Shanghai court. This person was a young woman. She looked beautiful and moving. Not only that, but under this beautiful face, every frown and smile had a strange feeling that could captivate one's soul. It was as if the bones of the surrounding men would soften a little when this woman's watery eyes swept over them. It was the nine-tailed celestial fox, Xiao Bai, who was separated from Ghost Li and Anan after the Great Change in Southern Border. She walked into the Shanghai Yuan restaurant openly and gracefully. For a moment, everyone, from the shopkeeper to the waiters, including the only 2 tables of customers, were dumbfounded. Unexpectedly, no one came up to greet her. But fortunately, Xiao Bai seemed to be used to this situation, did not get angry, only smiled and said, "No one to serve me?" After all, the shopkeeper was old, but he still had some self-control. He quickly composed himself and then hit the back of the head of the waiter who was still standing there in a daze. He said angrily, "The guests are here. Why aren't you going to greet them?" The waiter staggered, not knowing if he felt guilty, stammered over, not daring to admit it was Xiao Bai, smiled and said, "Miss, you want to eat or stay?" Xiao Bai thought for a moment, said, "Better eat something first. do you have a private room here? The waiter nodded repeatedly, said, Yes, yes, please go upstairs. Xiaobai nodded, walked upstairs, said, Find me a quiet seat by the window. The waiter smiled and said, Miss, don't worry. You're the only one in the private room upstairs. Whatever seat you want will be given to you, and I guarantee it will be quiet. No one will disturb you. Xiaobai was slightly surprised, said, Why won't there be anyone? I heard the business here used to be good. The waiter had already gone upstairs, smiled bitterly, and said, Who says it isn't? The business was really good at that time. The entire Heong City people were happy to come to our place to drink. But, damn it, after that demon beast a while ago, it made people panic. In the end, there were numerous casualties at this time. Not many people would want to come here. Xiaobai slowly nodded. She sighed softly and said, So that's how it is. No wonder. At this time, the waiter had already brought Little White upstairs to sit at a table by the window and was wiping the table with a cloth he brought along with him. Xiaobai looked out of the window from her seat, saw the pedestrians coming and going on the streets. It was still considered lively, but most of them rarely had smiles on their faces. Instead, there were more frowns on their faces. Xiaobai quietly watched for a moment, suddenly asked the waiter, Waiter, I want to ask you something. Answer me honestly. The waiter nodded and said, Miss, please ask. Xiaobai hesitated for a moment, said, All the commoners in this Heong City, of course including you, all hate that demon beast in their hearts. The waiter snorted. Hatred immediately showed on his face. Loudly said, Of course, this Heong City in that demon beast calamity. 9 out of 10 houses were empty. You can go to the streets and find someone to ask. I guarantee that he definitely has a relative who died under the demon beast's claws. Pitiful us common people are defenseless, unable to resist, but fortunately the immortals on Qingyun Hill showed great mercy, displayed their divine power, chased away that damn demon beast, and then let us live a normal life again. Xiaobai looked at the waiter's agitated expression, laughed bitterly in her heart. For some reason, flashed past that man in the southern border's subdued devil ancient cave, struggling at death's door under the remnant fire. Right and wrong in this world, who could say clearly? The waiter also seemed to realize that he had lost his composure. His face turned red as he took a step back and said in a low voice, This is just a casual remark. Miss, don't take it seriously. Do you want to order? Xiaobai smiled and said, All right, but you don't have to order any dishes. Go down and tell the shopkeeper, just make 3 or 4 plates of your specialized side dishes, and also bring 10 pots of good wine. The waiter was stunned, said in astonishment, 10 pots. Xiaobai glanced at him, nodded and said, 10 pots. The waiter paused for a moment and then hesitated for a long time, quietly said, Miss, may I ask if your friends are coming? If there are, I can add some bowls and chopsticks in advance. Xiaobai smiled and said, Don't think too much. It's just me alone. I want 10 pots of wine. Quickly bring it up. Don't ask about the rest. The waiter obediently retreated, but his eyes were clearly filled with disbelief. In fact, he couldn't be blamed. The most powerful person in the world could only drink 1 to 2 pots of wine. A person who could drink 4 or 5 pots of wine was either a wine immortal or a drunkard. It was just that this infinitely charming woman was clearly an ordinary person that couldn't be measured with common sense. Because there were not many customers, very quickly, the waiter had already served the dishes that Xiaobai ordered and placed them on the table. 10 wine pots with the word Shanghai Yuan engraved on the outside were also neatly placed on the other side of the table after a short while. Fortunately, this was the time when business was slow. If it was bustling, wouldn't it attract all the customers? But even so, Xiaobai most likely would not care. The waiter quickly left, leaving Xiaobai alone in the private room. She poured and drank by herself. Very quickly, a pot of fine wine had been emptied. However, a faint pink color appeared on her cheeks. There was no sign of drunkenness at all. Instead, it added a bit of seductive charm to her. She suddenly, softly sighed. The wine was as pure as amber and as thin as a thread. It poured into the wine cup from the mouth of the teapot, creating a small splash. Xiaobai stared at the wine cup in front of it, looking at its own reflection gently swaying on the surface of the water. Then she smiled, a trace of bitterness in her smile, picked up the wine cup, drank it in one gulp. On the streets outside the window, people made all kinds of sounds, endless streams of people, bustling with activity. Those sounds seemed to be very far away, as if it was in another world. She placed the sixth empty wine pot aside. The gentle blush on her cheeks contrasted with her eternal beauty. That pair of eyes, still clear. Always intoxicated by wine, never intoxicated. Her white teeth gently bit her lower lip, alone, quietly laughed, and then, with a shake of her head, raised her hand to pour the wine. On the streets outside the window, for some reason, the hubbub suddenly became louder. Xiaobai frowned, moved to the window, and looked out at the street. This glance, she was suddenly stunned. On the street below, a white-attired lady slowly walked over, her features clear and beautiful, floating like a fairy. If it wasn't Lu Sueki, who else could it be? The surrounding commoners seemed to be attracted by Lu Sueki's peerless beauty, but also intimidated by her cold temperament. Not dare to go up directly, gathered far away to watch, discussing spiritedly. It was because of this reason. Xiaobai looked at Lu Sueki. A smile slowly surfaced on her lips. Life is really everywhere we meet. She muttered to herself with a smile, yet not a smile, stood up, looked like she wanted to take the initiative to greet Lu Sueki. Just as she had just stood up, suddenly her expression changed. Her eyes left Lu Sueki, drifted to a remote corner far away in Heiyang City. A familiar black figure, extremely fast, flashed past, and then disappeared into another dark corner. And the next moment, another gray figure who was not unfamiliar to her followed closely behind. Xiaobai stared blankly at that corner for a while, and then her lips revealed a sneer. Today is really a coincidence on top of coincidence. If I don't join in the fun, I will really be letting myself down, and even more letting that Shangwan old ghost down. Hee. Amidst the cold laughter, her figure suddenly disappeared from Shanghai Yuan's private room like a ghost. After a long time, when the waiter came to clean up, he only saw an ingot of silver on the table and 6 empty wine jugs. The other 4 jugs had already disappeared. And on a main street, Lu Sueki's figure, unknowingly, also disappeared from the street. Chapter 420. The night was dark and windy. Thousands of lights were extinguished. The dark clouds in the firmament were heavy. The moon could not be seen. Only a few stars in the horizon, glimmering with weak light. The night wind blew past Heiyang City, like wild ghosts crying in the night. It was really cold and terrifying. Even thinking about the calamity that had just happened here on the streets outside the city, there was not a single person to be seen. On the long, ancient path, occasionally a few withered leaves were blown by the wind, rolling up and down alone, drifting far away. And in this strange night, a black figure suddenly floated up from Heiyang City, like a ghost, almost not a physical body, quietly landed outside the city, swiftly swept towards the ancient path south of Heiyang City. And not long after, another gray figure followed closely, stared intently at that black figure. These 2 people were naturally the shaman demon and Shangwan Su, from the southern border to now deep into Central Plains. This pursuit could be considered to have lasted for a long time. Shangwan Su with Funxiang Valley's profound skills, in addition to a mystical and unfathomable 9-cold ice condensing thorn magical weapon. The shaman demon had a hard time dealing with him. But the shaman demon's strange skills, every time out of one's expectations, in impossible places it could transform into thousands of changes and hundreds of maneuvers, also gave Shangwan Su a headache. Time and time again, he was about to capture him, but repeatedly missed. If it was any other ordinary person encountering such a situation, most would have given up. Just that Shangwan Su was under Funxiang Valley Master Yanilan's orders. The shaman demon most likely had the method to unlock the southern border ancient shaman tribe's heaven fire secret. No matter what, Funxiang Valley was determined to get it. So along the way, he braced himself and also chased. But this persistence was not entirely in vain. The difference in their skills was clear. The shaman demon in a short time would not be able to contend, but the shaman demon had repeatedly used various strange skills to escape, were seen by Shangwan Su. Gradually he had an idea. Until now, If the shaman demon wanted to escape from Shang Wan's pursuit, it was becoming more and more difficult. At this point, Shang Wansen knew it in his heart. The shaman demon understood it even more, but knowing was knowing, he really could not do anything. If there was a way to get rid of this abominable person, he would have used it countless of times in this 1,000 li, but Shang Wan had enjoyed a great reputation for close to 100 years. At that time, he was an influential figure in the southern border. His skills, knowledge, and experience, all of them were top-notch, far from what Li Sun and the other Funxiang Valley second-generation disciples could be compared to. Although the shaman demon continuously used different skills, but each and every one of them was seen through by him. At most, he could only hide for a moment. He escaped a distance, but not long after, Shang Wansu still caught up with him. Actually, the reason why Shang Wansu, or Funxiang Valley and Elon, must capture him back. The shaman demon already knew it from his few conversations with Shang Wansu, but to him, he was definitely not willing to surrender without putting up a fight. This night, watching as Shang Wansu was getting closer and closer, and the ancient path swiftly retreated, there were very few hills. Instead, the terrain gradually flattened and opened up. A stretch of wilderness appeared in front of them. In this kind of place, where else could he escape to? The shaman demon laughed bitterly under the black cloth, exerted his strength, and dashed forward, but the sound of the lightning-fast wind behind him grew louder and louder. Just when he was at a loss, suddenly he seemed to sense something. As if he discovered something, he turned his head and looked to the side. His name was Shaman Demon. As the name suggested, one would know what kind of skills and supernatural powers he was adept in. In addition, his physique was different from ordinary people. Towards spirits and energy, he was 10 times more sensitive than ordinary cultivators. This was still on the main ancient path. While he was hurriedly running, he still acutely discovered that in the depths of the ancient path in the wilderness, there was a deep and gloomy, ghostly energy emitting from far away. The shaman demon was overjoyed. His body made an emergency turn in the air, forcefully twisted over, swiftly swept into the wilderness. Shang Wan, who was pursuing him, snorted. His body, like duckweed, floated and swayed, indescribably free and at ease, easily changed direction, again exerted his strength to pursue. Just at this slight delay, the shaman demon once again widened the distance. His figure also looked slightly blurry, but Shang Wansu was not too worried. In this long and arduous journey, he had already grasped most of this mysterious shaman demon skills, expected that he would not be able to play any tricks. Right now his mood, more or less like a cat catching a mouse, spent countless of effort, pursuing for thousands of miles, exhausting mental and physical effort. Shouldn't you be punished? Shang Wansu sneered in his heart, with the confidence that the overall situation was in his hands, easily pursued. Very soon, what appeared in front of the evil shaman proved his conjecture. This was indeed a place with strong energy, called Mortuary in Central Plains, which was also where the corpses of those who had passed away were placed. But looking at the dilapidated condition of the small house in the courtyard, most likely it had been abandoned for a long time. The shaman demon couldn't help but feel disappointed with his original intention. This morgue was rich in energy. It was the best place for him to use his strange skills, but after being abandoned for a long time, the effect was reduced. Especially he had a few skills similar to the ghost way, and could control corpses. Its power was rather strong. Along the way, he did not have the chance to use it. If he took this opportunity to suddenly use it, most likely he could make Shang Wansu this old man suffer a great loss. Just that this morgue had been abandoned for a long time. Naturally, there would not be any recently deceased bodies lying here. But even though he was disappointed, but to the shaman demon's state of mind, this place could still be said to be a place where he could make a comeback. Without any hesitation, his black figure with a sound swept into that dark and gloomy house in the morgue. But when his figure floated in, an indistinct thought flashed past his mind. This morgue had been abandoned for a long time, but how could the eerie energy still be so strong and lasting? This night the moon was dark and the wind was strong. The morgue house was even darker. It was difficult to see one's 5 fingers. But to a cultivator, especially someone like the shaman demon whose physique was different from normal people, This darkness was not difficult. Very soon he could see the general situation in the morgue house. This place had indeed been abandoned for a long time. The surrounding walls were riddled with holes, extremely dilapidated. The first altar, which should have been used to offer sacrifices to the dead, had already fallen to the ground. In the middle of the house, a few broken coffins lay, disorderly. Some even had not been closed properly. Outside the morgue, the sound of the wind suddenly tightened. Evidently, Shangwan Su was hot on his heels again. Looked like he was about to catch up. The shaman demon did not hesitate. His body shook. Several strange nail-like iron weapons appeared at his hands, but his entire body was covered with iron thorns. Without even looking, his fingers flicked, sounds incessantly. These few monsters instantly disappeared into the darkness, flew into every corner of the house. And when each monster disappeared into the darkness, its tail would suddenly emit a faint blue halo, but it was only a flash, gone in a blink. As these monsters entered the darkness of the room, the yin-chi in the room, which was already bone-piercing, suddenly became 10 times stronger, as if it could pierce into the bones. The shaman demon sneered, his eyes swept, his entire body suddenly floated up as if weightless, straight towards a coffin in the corner of the house. The coffin looked ordinary, and the lid was not closed properly. Half of it was hanging out. The shaman demon quietly slid in, a place that ordinary people would avoid like the plague, but he seemed to like it very much, and, as his body slid in, that slanted coffin lid was also closed by him. The next moment, the sound of the wind abruptly stopped. The house immediately became quiet. There was no sound at all. Shangwan Su's figure appeared at the entrance of the house. The shaman demon hid in that coffin in the corner. His heart was assured, just that this coffin was broken. There were a few cracks on the wooden wall. Through the cracks, he could see Shangwan Su's every movement clearly. He was even more complacent. As long as Shangwan Su was not careful for a moment and walked 2 steps into this house, he would trigger the yin formation he had set, borrowing the strong eerie energy here. He would definitely catch Shangwan Su unprepared. He was anticipating, but Shangwan Su seemed to be extremely careful, did not rush into search for the shaman demon. Instead stood at the entrance, carefully peering into the house. Seemed like he would not dare to brazenly enter for the time being. The shaman demon was disappointed, secretly cursed the old thief was really cunning, regained his senses, slowly started to notice where he was. Unexpectedly, as soon as he came back to his senses, he felt an explosion in his mind, and he was almost scared out of his wits. He was in this coffin. There was actually another person, actually with the shaman demon's uniqueness, in this coffin, not to mention a person, even if there was a dead person. To put it bluntly, even if it was a skeleton, he would turn a blind eye and might even feel some familiarity. But unfortunately, in the coffin below him, there was a living person. And this person, from when he entered the small house to when he slid into the coffin, he was completely undetected. Not even the sound of breathing was heard. The shaman demon, in shock, his entire body started to tremble, but finally he managed to control himself with his remaining rationality. Did not shout out or break out of the coffin, but his forehead, back, and palms were already covered in cold sweat. But the next moment, what made him even more shocked was that the living person below him was not breathing. A living person who was not breathing. The shaman demon in that instant had already judged clearly. The person below him was indeed a living person. Because both of them were in the same coffin, there was not much space between them. With his sharp senses, he very quickly discovered that this person's heart was beating slowly, but for some reason, this person's mouth and nose were not moving. The shaman demon quietly stretched his hand over to check. After a long while, there was no movement. This person was indeed not breathing. The shaman demon felt his scalp turning numb. This unimaginable change happened right in front of him. The shaman demon originally wanted to plot against Shangwan Su, but this time his mind was in a mess. For a moment, he could not concentrate, his blood surging. Just that he was, after all, a highly skilled person with a thought. He immediately felt something was amiss, quickly activated his true way, calmed his mind. After a moment, he then calmed down. Chapter 4:21. However, at this moment, when the shaman demon was planning how to deal with this unexpected situation, an even bigger surprise, again made him dumbstruck, bewildered. The entire coffin suddenly emitted a faint sound. "Pah!" Like something closed. The sound was very soft, almost inaudible, but in this small house, in these highly cultivated people's ears, it was a totally different matter. Shangwan-su, almost at the same time, abruptly turned around, stared at this corner. And the shaman demon was stunned, instantly felt that this coffin that he was in suddenly emitted a strange, evil power from all directions. Strands like ropes, like hemp, tightly restrained the space in this coffin. With his skills, encountering this inexplicable evil power, he actually had no power to resist. In that instant, he was immobilized, locked by this invisible evil power in this coffin. The shaman demon's soul seemed to be scared out of his body. But, as if it was not enough, at this moment, in the dark space in the coffin, that living person who felt like a fat man suddenly woke up, opened his eyes. Two people's eyes, in the air, in this strange atmosphere, looked at each other. Then, that unknown fat man, without a sound, faced the shaman demon, smiled. Shangwan-su stared intently at that corner in the middle of the house, but did not immediately go over to check. Although he did not have the shaman demon's special body, but with his high skills, naturally he could roughly distinguish the scenery in this house. At the same time, with his knowledge, of course he also knew what kind of place this was. But he was not the shaman demon. Shangwan-su had never liked morgue, this kind of place, especially to an elderly. He disliked this kind of place even more. At the same time, with his cultivation, when he just entered this house, he acutely sensed that in this house, the abundance of inchi was really not a small matter, far from an ordinary morgue could compare to. What kind of evil skills the shaman demon was proficient in, he knew better than anyone, and right now this place was obviously the shaman demon's favorite place. So he must be careful. Shangwan-su activated True Way, protected his body, carefully examined this strange house again. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious, he slowly stepped out. However, he had only taken half a step when he suddenly pulled back. At the same time, a cold light flashed in his right hand, and the 9 chill ice condensing thorn appeared in his hand. Old people always seem to be very careful. He finally took his first step towards a corner. Outside the house, a gust of chilly wind blew, whistling continuously, making one's hair stand on end. Shangwan-su was on high alert. Not a single change in the house could escape his eyes and ears, but the surroundings were dark. Other than silence, there was no sound at all. He sneered and suddenly raised his voice. "I already knew you were in this coffin. Old friend, if you still don't come out, don't blame me for beating you up along with the coffin and making you suffer." There was no reply. The surroundings were still silent. Shangwan-su angrily snorted, said, pretending to be mysterious. After speaking, without any hesitation, he stepped forward. At the same time, the 9 chill ice condensing thorn in his hand glowed sharply. The surrounding temperature immediately dropped. But just when Shangwan-su was ready to strike, suddenly from another corner of the house, a faint blue light quietly flew out. The entire body was wrapped in yin energy, attacking towards Shangwan-su's back. Shangwan-su was originally on full alert, but this evil yin formation set up by the evil shaman. Its owning energy was completely restrained. Its entire body could absorb the surrounding yin energy and wrap it up. Shangwan-su's skills were profound and could sense every movement of the energy channels in this place. It was originally a remarkable skill, but unexpectedly at this moment, it became a weakness. The evil shaman saw this point and made a sneak attack. Shangwan-su did not sense anything unusual until that yin spirit was 3 chi from his back. The sound of the wind suddenly intensified. The yin energy surged. He was then shocked. In a flash, his profound skills were completely revealed. He decisively took a big step forward. At the same time, the 9 chill ice condensing thorn floated his back. A cold light exploded. The silver-white light immediately lit up the entire house. Just that in this strange atmosphere, the originally beautiful light now looked deathly pale, really made one's scalp numb. The silver light emitted from the 9 chill ice condensing thorn turned into a small light shield behind Shangwan-su. At the most dangerous moment, it deflected that Yin spirit. Just that without waiting for Shangguan Su to catch his breath, that big step he had just taken had already completely activated the evil shaman formation. Immediately blue light flashed from several corners of the house. Several Yin spirits mixed with eerie energy shot out, and what was even more strange was the Yin spirit that he deflected drew a semicircle in the air, as if someone was guiding it. Again silently attacked Shangguan Su's back. Shangguan Su in his haste. For a moment he was flustered, but he was after all not an ordinary person. The 9-chill ice condensing thorn glimmered, where the icy light pointed. In a short moment, the entire house, from the roof to the floor, was covered with a thin layer of frost. And under this bone-piercing cold, the Yin specters that were propelled by the strange mana also seemed to suffer an extremely great resistance. Several Yin specters that flickered with blue light slowed down one after another. At the same time, on the Yin specters' iron-like weapons, in just a short period of time, a thick layer of ice actually formed. Although their speed was still very fast, but with this delay, it had already allowed Shangguan Su time to react. Immediately in the silver-white light, several consecutive sounds, several of the Yin spirits were struck down by the 9-chill ice-condensing thorn. When they landed, most of them were hit by the cold energy from the 9-chill ice-condensing thorn. Under the ice, the Yin spirits that landed were all broken into pieces. Shangguan Su turned the situation around, broke the evil shaman's sinister formation, could not help but laughed out loud, shouted to the coffin, "Now you have no other way, right, if you don't come out and give up." The word capture had not left his mouth. Suddenly Shangguan Su's face changed greatly. His face contorted, made a pained howl, his entire body flipped out, a loud sound, smashed a big hole in the wall, flew out. In between his figures, a faint blue light could be seen flickering on his back. It was the first Yin spirit, without knowing when, had completely avoided his eyes and ears, heavily injured him. This thrilling battle in the house, the evil shaman and that mysterious fat man below him could see clearly through the cracks of the coffin. Especially the last hurried move. Shangguan Su was experienced, but he still fell into the trap. In the darkness, the mysterious fatty's eyes actually had a hint of admiration. He suddenly said, "You can actually summon a ghost like Yin Mei and control it again. This kind of cultivation is really rare." The evil shaman for the first time heard this person speak, was shocked, but from his tone and eyes, it seemed that he did not have any enmity, and right now he himself was also agitated. With a bitter laugh, shook his head and said, "You are wrong." That fat man was surprised, startled, and said, "Where am I wrong?" The evil shaman sighed, said, "Those Yin spirits' formations were laid by me, that's right, but that last Yin spirit was controlled by another skilled person. It has nothing to do with me." He hatefully said, "If I really have that level of skill, I wouldn't be trapped here." The fat man frowned and did not speak anymore. The Lich Demon glanced at him. In just a few words, he had already sensed the fat man's situation. This person seemed to be in a similar situation as him, also trapped in this strange coffin. But what was different from the Lich Demon was that this fat man clearly had an even more powerful and strange power that had shackled all of his meridians. The evil shaman was secretly shocked. The restrictions on this coffin he was in, even with his high level of skill, it was still enough to restrain him and make him unable to move, but to this fat man, it seemed that someone still felt it was not enough, still wanted to lay a terrifying, strange spell on his body, trapping him. Then if this fat man did not have any restrictions, wouldn't his skills be shockingly high? And thinking deeper, to be able to restrain this fat man, what kind of terrifying person would it be? The evil shaman's mind was in a mess. Central plains, hidden dragons, and crouching tigers. It was far beyond what he had expected. And at this moment, Shangguan Su's angry bellow was heard from outside the house. "Which other skilled person is there? Please show yourself." Backstabbing. What kind of hero is that? Inside the house, the evil shaman and the fat man looked at each other. Obviously, Shangguan Su's eyes were like torches. With one look, he could tell that the one who injured him was not the evil shaman, but someone else. At this moment, a voice as sweet as a silver bell was heard, coming down from the eerie and ghastly roof. With some sarcasm, Some joy said, "Didn't you say pretending to be mysterious? I will let you see. Who is the one pretending to be mysterious?" The evil shaman and that mysterious fat man were trapped in the coffin. Naturally, they could not see who the girl on the roof was, but Shangguan, who was standing in the courtyard, enduring the pain, looked up, suddenly inhaled a breath of cold air, coldly said, "It's actually you?" That female voice laughed and said, "If not me, who is it?" He. The laughter was clear, with a captivating charm. In the eerie night, a slender figure sat alone on the roof, her features like a painting, her eyes like water, 10,000 kinds of amorous feelings, peerless elegance. If not nine-tailed celestial fox Xiaobai, who else could it be? Chapter 422. Shangguan only felt numbness around the wound on his back. At the same time, the cold yin qi continuously entered his meridians from the evil spirit. It was as if thousands of ants were gnawing on him. The pain was unbearable. In just a short moment, his forehead was already dripping with cold sweat, and his face had also become pale. Little White, who was standing on the roof, saw Shangguan's embarrassment. The smile on his face deepened, as if he was gloating. He laughed and said, "You didn't expect this, old devil. You have such a day." Shangguan gritted his teeth and snorted. He forced himself to stand up and said sternly, "Demon, you still dare to show yourself to me?" Little White laughed, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. With a wave of his sleeve, he floated down from the roof and landed not far from Shangguan. He smiled and said, "I don't dare to come out and see you. Yes, I'm a coward. I didn't dare to show myself to you, so I came out to give you a greeting gift. That's why I dare to show myself to you. Old devil, you made me live in seclusion in the mysterious fire altar for so many years. This time, I'll be sorry if I don't repay you properly." Shangguan's face was full of anger, but he was actually a little scared. Back then, in the mysterious fire altar, he mostly relied on the earth-fire spiritual power of the mysterious fire altar and the remnants of the 8 ferocious mysterious fire array to suppress the 1,000-year-old fox. Otherwise, with the 9-tailed celestial fox's cultivation, he was not confident that he could deal with her. But now that the 9-tailed celestial fox had broken free from all restraints, he was careless and fell into this demon's trap. His vitality was greatly damaged, and he was probably no match for her. At this moment, the night wind was blowing in the wilderness. There were ghostly cries and howls coming from all directions. It was as if countless ghosts were crying at the same time in this bleak night. The yin qi was strong. In the righteous hall, Little White and Shangguan were still facing each other. Although Shangguan had already been plotted against and was severely injured, Little White did not seem to have any intention of dealing with this old enemy immediately. On the contrary, she seemed to be sizing up Shangguan with interest, like a cat catching a mouse, with a mocking look on her face. Shangguan knew that what he needed the most at this moment was to find a safe and quiet place to heal his injuries. However, there was such an unfathomable 1,000-year-old demon fox standing in front of him. It was really annoying. In his anger, Shangguan said hatefully, "Since you insist on coming to deal with me, why aren't you doing anything? What is the meaning of standing there and not moving?" Xiaobai smiled and said, "I'm fine. I don't mind telling you. I'm not like you humans, always thinking that life is too short. I have a lot of time that I don't know how to spend, so I'll just stand here and slowly look at you. Anyway, I'm very patient." When Shangguan heard this, he was so angry that he was fuming. This demon was clearly trying to hold him back. Knowing that he was seriously injured, he did not want to give him a chance to heal. As time passed, Shangguan would be exhausted. Without the 9-tailed celestial fox doing anything, he would not be able to hold on. Helplessly, Shangguan knew that, but he was helpless against Little White's shameless method. If he fought, he would be seriously injured and the opponent's skills were unfathomable. It would be difficult to win. If he did not fight, his injuries would worsen, and if this dragged on, he would die. It seemed that other methods were useless. He could only run away. However, Little White's watery eyes stared straight at Shangguan. Even he himself was not confident that he could escape from Little White's clutches. This was truly a situation of hitting a wall on all sides, and being in a hopeless situation. Shangguan's face was ashen, hatred, anger, fear, anxiety. All kinds of emotions flashed across his face. Little White saw this and was very happy. She had been imprisoned in the mysterious fire altar by the Funxiang Valley for many years. If Ghostly had not unlocked the seal, she did not know if she would have to stay in that damned place for the rest of her life. The suffering in there was really hard to describe. Hence, in Xiaobai's heart, towards Funxiang Valley Shangguan, Su, and the rest, she was extremely resentful. Although that day, when she escaped with Gue Li, she had a moment of enlightenment and did not purposely return to find trouble with Funxiang Valley. But this time Shangguan Su had voluntarily delivered himself to her. How could she treat it as if she did not see it? Mercy and kindness were things that the nine-tailed celestial fox would do when she was in a good mood. But she had never been a bodhisattva who did not remember the mistakes of others and treated others with leniency. Thinking of this, Little White could not help but laugh out loud. All these years of resentment seemed to have been vented out tonight. It was really satisfying. Shangguan Su's mood was naturally not as good as Little White's. On the contrary, he seemed to be unable to suppress his injuries. His whole body started to tremble slightly. His demonic ghost power rose, and a faint blue light shrouded his back. Little White's smile deepened. Shangguan Su's breathing became faster and faster. Suddenly, he took a few steps closer to Little White. Little White frowned slightly, her face slightly guarded. Although Shangguan Su was injured, but this person's cultivation was not to be underestimated. Little White did not dare to be too careless. But an unbelievable thing happened in the blink of an eye. Shangguan Su's face was full of pain. The veins on his face were bulging. It seemed that his injuries were serious, and he could not hold on any longer. And his eyes were rolling back. A trace of fear flashed across his face. With a plop, he actually knelt down in front of Little White and begged, "Fox Fairy Lady, please spare my life." If it was Shangguan Su who attacked, even if it was an earth-shattering move, Little White would most likely take it seriously. Even if Shangguan Su suddenly shouted and 30 to 50 Funxiang Valley experts jumped out, Little White would still be able to accept this reality. But this old man in front of her who suddenly knelt down and begged for mercy gave Little White a completely different impression. For a moment, even with her 1,000 years of cultivation, she was stunned and did not know what to do. But in this short moment, Little White had already understood. It was just that Shangguan Su deliberately did not hesitate to humiliate himself, just for this short moment. In an instant, Shangguan Su, who was on the verge of death, seemed to have changed into a different person. His entire face was filled with killing intent, and the painful expression disappeared. Even the blue light halo on his back was suppressed in the blink of an eye. The 9 frigid eyes piercer shone with a silver light, like a dragon sweeping across the sky, flew out from under his hand with a boom, straight towards Little White's chest. Little White shouted angrily. Her body quickly floated backwards. At the same time, her sleeves flew up, at the same time blocking in front of her body, forming a cloth wall. But Shangguan Su's attack was the result of his lifetime of cultivation. Its power was not to be underestimated. With a sigh sound, his sleeves were instantly torn into pieces by the 9 frigid ice piercer, almost at the same time turning into ice cubes, shattering and falling to the ground. And the silver-white light did not stop at all and went straight towards Little White. Little White's body was still retreating, but the hurried retreat was not as fast as Shangguan's calculated fatal attack. Seeing that the fatal light was about to catch up to her body, Little White's face turned pale, but she did not panic. Her hands suddenly clasped in front of her chest, crossed and extended, but made a strange gesture. Shio, a long and mysterious whistle, suddenly reverberated from an unknown place. The whistle was desolate and proud, quiet and self-contained, directly bringing people into a mysterious state. On a full moon night, in the wilderness, a white fox was crying to the moon. In the next moment, the 9 frigid ice piercers shone brightly. A silver light flashed, enveloping Little White's entire body. Shangguan's desperate counterattack succeeded, but there was no complacent look on his face. Instead, He gritted his teeth, full of resentment. But after all, he was not an ordinary person. After weighing the situation, he did not hesitate at all and immediately flew backwards. With only a few ups and downs, his gray figure had already disappeared into the vast wilderness outside the memorial hall. The silver light halo slowly receded. There were faint bloodstains on the ground, but little White was gone. In midair, the mysterious fox's howl continued for a long time before it quietly subsided. Correspondingly, Whitey's graceful body once again appeared in midair, as if it had appeared out of thin air. Then it slowly descended. Chapter 4:23. She lowered her head, looked at the blood stain on the ground. Her teeth bit her lips, her face furious. Just now she was careless, did not expect that in order to survive, Shang Wansu was willing to be wretched and thought of such a method. Instead, she fell into his trap and almost lost her life. But luckily, she was not an ordinary person. She was a nine-tailed celestial fox. Fox had 9 tails. Unforeseeable. The night wind was cold, blew over from afar. On her face, it was really a little chilly. Xiaobai stood in the courtyard, composed herself, and then, slowly turned around, looked at that dark little house. She slowly walked in. In the morgue house, it was still a stretch of silence and darkness, as if that soul-stirring, intense fight had never happened before. Her figure stood at the door of the house. Under the dim starlight of the night, her figure seemed to be drifting, making her look even more strange. However, it was clear that Little White would not be afraid of this kind of atmosphere like ordinary people. She was the ancestor of these bewitching ways. When it came to pretending to be mysterious, not to mention people, even if a real ghost came, it might not be able to beat her. Who knew which one would be scared away? Right now, Xiao Bai's clear eyes swept past this dark little house. In between, she carefully looked at the few coffins in the house. In her eyes, a puzzled look flashed past. But in the end, her attention was still focused on the coffin in that secluded corner. "Come out. I know you are inside." Xiaobai did not walk over, only stood there, said indifferently. No one answered. There was only silence. The shaman demon who was hiding in the coffin, not knowing what kind of mood he was in, he thought he could deceive everyone by hiding in the coffin. Unexpectedly, he was discovered by Shang Wansu and Xiao Bai, and even in the coffin, there was a living person who came in before him, and he did not discover it. Thinking about it, that mood must be a failure. Xiao Bai frowned slightly, took a step forward, but then stopped. At the same time, looked at the surrounding darkness again. The bewilderment in her eyes became even more intense, as if in the depths of the darkness, there was something that actually made her a little fearful, hesitating to move forward. She was silent for a moment and said, "I know your identity. That day in the subdue devil ancient cave, you must have seen me. Since that's the case, there's no enmity between us. I just have one thing to ask you." Her voice reverberated in this house. The Een wind was still howling outside. Just now Shang Wansu made a big hole in the wall. Right now from that hole, quite a lot of cold air seemed to blow in. After a long time, suddenly the evil shaman's voice was heard from the coffin. "That's right. I remember you. What do you want to ask me?" Xiaobai raised her eyebrows, stared at the coffin, and said, "Can't you come out and speak?" The shaman demon paused for a moment and then unhurriedly said, "I like it like this. Speak quickly if you have something to say." Xiaobai snorted, said, "All right, then I won't waste my breath. Let me ask you, how is the heaven fire born?" Once the words were spoken, the evil shaman demon was clearly shocked. After a moment, he solemnly said, "Why are you asking this for?" Xiaobai indifferently said, "That day that master of yours promised me something. In the end, he died before he could do it. I finally found out that there is still a fish that escaped the net. Naturally, I have to ask you clearly." The evil shaman demon snorted, said, "He is not my master. Only shaman lady is." Xiaobai retorted, said, "Then what have you been doing all these years?" The evil shaman demon was silent for a long time, said, "What I have done is not for the world to understand reason." Xiaobai impatiently said, "Forget it. Your whatever reason. I can't be bothered, and also can't be bothered. I only want to know about my matter. Are you willing to speak or not?" The evil shaman demon was silent again. After a long time, slowly said, "The southern border 5 tribes are descendants of the shaman tribe. You should know this, right?" Xiaobai frowned, said, "Why?" The evil shaman demon indifferently said, "The shaman tribe's secret should be inherited by the shaman tribe descendants. That's all I have to say. Don't ask anymore." Xiaobai repeated the 2 sentences of the evil shaman demon a few times in her heart, but her face did not change, only coldly snorted and said, pretending to be mysterious. After speaking, she seemed to have made up her mind, strided towards the evil shaman demon's coffin. This house was not big. A few coffins were placed in disarray. Every few steps she would encounter one. Another 2 steps, and it would be the evil shaman demon's coffin. In the darkness, something seemed to be stirring, staring at Xiaobai's figure. Xiaobai expressionlessly looked like she was about to continue forward, but just when she was about to step out, suddenly her body abruptly turned. From her original slow steps instantly became like a fleeing rabbit. Almost like lightning, her right hand suddenly stretched out, slender fingers grabbed that huge coffin beside her. Rumble. A loud sound. That huge coffin, which looked to be almost twice the size of Xiaobai, was inconceivably grabbed by Xiaobai's slender fingers. And what happened next was even more astounding. Xiaobai's entire body immediately floated out of the small house, and with the strength of her fingers, she lifted this huge object and brought out 2. The huge coffin made a deep rumble in the air, low reverberations. The huge shadow shrouded Xiaobai's slender body. Looked really strange. Even the evil shaman demon in the corner of the coffin was stunned by Xiaobai's sudden strange action. And the darkness in the house seemed to be disturbed by Xiaobai's strange action. In the violent air movement, eerie hissing sounds were emitted. Xiaobai landed in the morgue without hesitation, gathered all her strength. A faint white light flashed past her 5 fingers. Her right arm waved. The huge coffin was pulled by a great force. Under the wave of Xiaobai's arm, the coffin crashed into the hard rocks on the ground. Boom! A deafening roar resounded far and near in an instant. Suffocating dust instantly flew up in all directions like water vapor. The entire huge coffin was smashed into pieces, and splinters of wood splashed everywhere. Xiaobai had already hidden to one side. She naturally did not care about the sharp thorns and splinters, but the dirty dust was unbearable for her. After passing through the thick smoke and dust, a violent cough was suddenly heard. After a short moment, a figure stumbled out from the smoke and dust. His clothes were tattered, and his face was covered in dust. He looked extremely battered and exhausted. In the small house, the evil shaman demon felt his hair standing dumbfounded. In the coffin beside the small house, there was someone hiding. For a moment, the evil shaman demon felt his surroundings were really eerie, as if everywhere was suspicious. Just as he unintentionally looked down, he discovered that the fatty who was in the same coffin had a mocking look in his eyes. At the same time, there seemed to be a hint of gratification. And outside the courtyard, the dust gradually calmed down. That person who staggered out from the coffin was crawling to one side, breathing in big mouthfuls of fresh air. Xiaobai stretched out her hand, waved a few times in front of her, fanning away the remaining dust, slowly walked towards that person. That person turned back, laughed dryly. Xiaobai looked at him carefully, suddenly was stunned, involuntarily said, "Why is it you?" That person laughed bitterly, seemed embarrassed, wiped the dust off his face, laughed dryly, and said, "Naturally, it is this great immortal me." The person who appeared in front of the 9-tailed celestial fox Xiaobai unexpectedly was the self-proclaimed immortal guide, iron-mouthed deity, Zhou Yixian. Chapter 424. Tana's car right now was covered with a layer of dust. Seemed like he had been lying in that coffin for a long period of time. The sage-like demeanor he had before was completely gone. Xiaobai looked him up and down, naturally would not think about the senseless question of whether Zhou Yixian wanted to lie in the coffin himself. Directly said, "Why are you in the coffin?" Tana's Ka smiled bitterly, said, "Of course I was caught and thrown in." Xiaobai looked around, glanced at the small dark house, said, Then who are the people in the two coffins beside you, do you know? Taniska nodded, said, the one on the left is my granddaughter Xiao Huan. The one on the right is Wild Dog Taoist. Xiaobai snorted, glanced at Taniska. Taniska was embarrassed, but right now he couldn't care about his face. Quickly bowed to Xiaobai and pleaded, this great immortal. Please be merciful. Since you've saved this old man, you should also save the two of them. Xiaobai shrugged her shoulders, walked 2 steps towards the house, suddenly frowned, seemed to think of something, turned and looked at Taniska. Her face was a little strange. Looked at Taniska. Taniska felt uneasy being looked at by her, laughed dryly and said, You, why are you looking at me? Xiaobai stared at him, said, What did you call me just now? Taniska exclaimed and took a step back, his face showing regret. Xiaobai carefully looked at him again, faintly said, I have underestimated you. Can actually see through my identity. Taniska, with a bitter face, cupped his hands and said, Miss, look at this. I didn't mean anything else. I just said something that I shouldn't have said. Please forgive me, Mississippi. Please forgive me. Xiaobai in this short while carefully observed Zhou Yixian, found that this old man's footsteps were light, his qi and blood were insufficient, indeed not a highly skilled cultivator, just that for some reason, this person's eyes were so sharp, much sharper than many famous cultivators in the past. While Xiaobai was thinking, Zhou Yixian instead became more anxious, but in helplessness he could only smile and said to Xiaobai, Miss, be kind, or save people first, okay? Xiaobai coldly snorted, glanced at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian was quiet like a cicada in winter, quietly stepped back, was about to say something, but Xiaobai suddenly flashed, already drifted into the dark house. The next moment, sounds of rumbling were heard. Strange cries were heard from the house. After a while, Zhou Yixian felt his vision darken. Aya! He immediately ran. Just as he ran away, he saw the 2 coffins that were placed on the ground were thrown out by Little White from the small house. Pung pung. 2 loud sounds were heard as the coffins smashed onto the ground. Instantly, dust flew again in this courtyard. Debris flew everywhere. Worse than before, in the misty flying dust, a man and a woman coughing was heard. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist figures, as expected, stumbled out from the dust. Zhou Yixian was overjoyed, quickly went up to them, pulled them far away, asked questions. Xiaobai had also walked out from the house, stood far away, watching the 3 of them. But her face was still solemn, glanced at the darkness in the house from time to time. The dust in the courtyard gradually settled down. Xiaobai stood motionless, and Zhou Yixian and the other 3 who had escaped from disaster were originally extremely happy, but right now, for some reason, looking at them from afar, they started to argue. Specifically, it should be that Zhou Yixian said something, but Xiao Huan firmly objected. As for Wild Dog Taoist, as usual, only watched them talk, did not express any opinion. Xiaobai stood far away watching them talking for half a day, but seemed unable to reach a consensus. Couldn't help but felt curious, and quietly walked over. Zhou Yixian frowned, snappily said, All right, don't talk anymore. Let's leave this damn place immediately. If not, when that devil comes back, we will really die without a burial place. Xiao Huan sneered, said, Then what about that person inside? Taniska was stunned for a moment. It seemed that he was a little ashamed in his heart, but he didn't admit defeat verbally. He forced himself to say, What does a kid like you know? First of all, that person is under the spell of Kill Heartlock. Second of all, there are other restrictions on the coffin. We can't save him. It's better for us to leave first. Otherwise, if we're delayed and that devil comes back, wouldn't we be throwing our lives away for nothing? Xiao Huan angrily said, Grandpa, you're talking nonsense again. That day that person was captured by that devil. Because of us, how can we be so ungrateful? Zhou Yixian shook his head, said, Wrong. It is true that he was captured that day, but that he was captured because of us is complete nonsense. From my point of view, that devil's cultivation is high. We are naturally far inferior, but that person who helped us is also incomparable. Xiao Huan's lips curled up high, hatefully said, Anyway, we can't just leave him like this. Zhou Yixian frowned tightly, with a bitter face, was about to persuade this stubborn granddaughter. Suddenly Xiaobai's voice was heard, said, That person that you were talking about, And that devil, who exactly is he? Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were startled. Then both shook their heads. Xiao Bai glanced at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian instead looked away, said, "The three of us are ordinary people. How would we know about these people? We are scared to death, don't know." Xiao Bai frowned slightly. To say that the girl in front of her and the Taoist beside her with a strange face like a dog did not know. She did not doubt it. Just that Zhou Yixian, this old man, was extremely strange. It made people have suspicions. Most likely there was something strange. But Zhou Yixian insisted that he did not know. Even though Xiao Bai was suspicious, but there was nothing she could do. She could only try, said to Xiao Huan. "Little girl, do you remember that person who helped you, and that devil used what kind of magical weapon?" From the first time Xiao Huan saw Xiao Bai, her heart was moved. She was usually proud of her beauty, but facing Xiao Bai's unparalleled beauty, bewitching beauty, especially that seemingly light, but no matter what, there was that indescribable heart-palpitating seductiveness hanging lightly in the corner of her eyes. This kind of mature grace was something Xiao Huan could never compare with. In her heart, she liked Xiao Bai a little. Furthermore, Xiao Bai was their benefactor who had saved the three of them. She felt closer to her. Now that Xiao Bai had asked her with a smile, she felt that this girl's eyes were as gentle as water. Although she was a girl, her heart could not help but skip a beat. Her heartbeat quickened. Even her words were slightly nervous, and she stuttered. "WH what?" Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist were surprised. Looked at Xiao Huan. Xiao Bai smiled. Asked again. Xiao Huan composed herself, scolded herself in her heart, then looked down at the ground, said, "I know this. That person who helped us, his skills were very high. He used a celestial sword magical weapon, 3 chi long. The color was crimson yellow. When he used it, it was really powerful, like a ball of crimson flame." Crimson flame. Suddenly, a shocked, surprised, and nervous cry was heard from the entrance of the morgue courtyard. The four of them were shocked, turned back, and saw a white-attired girl, elegant and beautiful. In her hand was a light blue celestial sword, glowing. One look, and they knew it was a high-grade treasure. And this girl's appearance was comparable to Xiao Bai, also a peerless beauty. But if it was not Qin Yun Hill Small Bamboo Valley Lu Sweki, who else could it be? Below Qin Yun Hill, Grass Temple Village ruins. Under the dilapidated walls, among the weeds, the undulating cries of the insects were heard. In this desolate place, it added some desolation. The night was deep, the dark clouds and the firmament pressed down. Only a few stars, twinkling weakly, still stubbornly peeked out, shedding some light. In a corner of the village, beside a wall which had already collapsed, Ghostly quietly leaned against the mud wall, quietly sitting on the ground. Beside him, the monkey Xiao Hui lay on the ground, its head pillowed on Ghost Li's thigh, its 4 limbs spread out, snoring loudly in sleep. Ghostly did not sleep. His eyes were still open, quietly watching every blade of grass and every tree, every inch of land, every dilapidated wall. Chapter 425. This was his hometown, the place where he spent the first few years of his life. Just that time quietly passed. These eventually all became memories, leaving only this stretch of ruins, making one sigh. But what was the purpose of living? Ghostly observed everything around him, and then slowly lifted his head, looked up at the night sky. The curtain of night hung low, above the horizon, not knowing if there were really deities, demons, and Buddhas who could hear the voices of the people. The monkey Xiao Hui's mouth moved a few times, made a few sounds, turned over, rubbed its head on Ghostly's thigh a few times, and continued to snore. Maybe it dreamed of its favorite wild fruit? Ghostly looked away, looked at Xiao Hui, stretched out his hand, gently stroked its head. The fur on the monkey's head, soft to the touch, transmitted a trace of warmth. A trace of a smile appeared on his lips, a gentle and pure smile, like that young man many years ago, in this once village, shouting and laughing loudly, running with all his might. The night breeze rustled. There seemed to be someone whispering softly. The grass and trees moved with the wind. The wind carried the fragrance of grass. He closed his eyes. Such a quiet, tranquil night. Suddenly, the monkey Xiao Hui's body quivered. Its three eyes abruptly opened. Its head also slightly left Ghost Lee's thigh, slightly raised, as if listening to something. At the same time, Ghost Lee's brows slightly frowned. The faint smile on his lips quietly disappeared. He quietly opened his eyes again. Reflected in his eyes was this world again. He stretched out his hand, gently patted Xiao Hui's head. Xiao Hui immediately calmed down. Turned its head, its three eyes rolled around, but it did not sleep. Gently climbed up, used its hand to scratch its head, and then with a slight push of its legs, jumped onto Ghost Lee's shoulder, after which it kept looking around. Ghost Lee was still sitting in this secluded corner. In front of him, a broken wall happened to block his body, just that the cracks on the wall allowed him to look out. Such a desolate place. Nobody would come in the day. Could it be that in this dark and windy night, something unexpected would happen? A strange aura, like appearing out of thin air, suddenly descended into this ruins. Ghost Lee instinctively sensed something. His brows frowned even tighter. The night breeze turned cold, like the legendary Een wind from the 9 Netherworlds, bone-piercing cold, just that the cold was not on the skin, but an illusion of the cold entering the heart. In this strange and gloomy wind, a black figure descended from the sky, silently landing in the center of this grass temple village ruins. In the distance, through that gap, Ghost Lee quietly watched that black figure, but his heart was really shaken. This unknown person, the evil energy contained in his body, was something he had never seen before in his life. Even though they were separated by quite a distance, but the moment the black figure landed, he could still feel the blood in his entire body churning slightly. But such a highly skilled person, why would he come to this desolate and uninhabited grass temple village ruins in the middle of the night? Ghost Lee could not figure out, could only stare intently at that figure. Very soon, he discovered something strange. He discovered that the reason why the figure was black was not because he was dressed in black, but his entire body was surrounded by a layer of constantly churning strange black air, making one unable to see his real face. Ghost Lee was even more puzzled, carefully observed this person. But after this person landed, he did not move immediately, stood there strangely, not moving for a long time. Just when Ghost Lee was puzzled, that black figure suddenly moved and then slowly walked forward. Ghost Lee frowned tightly, coldly watched that figure. Looking at that black figure stepping on the grass, slowly walking past one after another ruins, Ghost Lee's eyes stopped on him, also quietly moving. This black figure did not seem to have any special purpose. Looked like he was taking a stroll. Ghost Lee grew up in Grass Temple Village and was extremely familiar with the village, but he could not tell where exactly this person was heading to, only that this black figure seemed to be looking for something. After a while, the black figure seemed to have discovered something and stopped in his tracks. Ghost Lee was startled, quickly looked towards the direction where that person was facing. Suddenly his heart tightened. The place where that person was facing was that abandoned temple where not even a blade of grass grew. That person was wrapped in black air, slowly walked towards the dilapidated temple, but did not walk in, instead stood outside the temple. Ghost Lee looked from the secluded corner behind him, saw that person assessing the temple from top to bottom, suddenly raised his hand. A sharp whistle was heard from his hand. The next moment, one of the black air surrounding that person separated, indistinctly turned into a black sharp arrow in the air, responded and shot out, swiftly charged toward a broken pillar in the temple. Ghost Lee's hand involuntarily tightened, subconsciously clenched into a fist, but he still endured, calmed his mind, quietly looked over. This black chi arrow seemed to be quite powerful. Sure enough, in the blink of an eye, it collided with a broken stone pillar. With a muffled boom, the originally broken stone pillar was immediately smashed into pieces. But what was even more strange was that at the same time, when the stone pillar was smashed into pieces, 4 or 5 ghostly lights suddenly rose from the place where the stone pillar was originally standing. The Yin Shi was miserable, and surprisingly, it was actually a few ghosts. For a moment, the Yin energy around the small temple surged. Ghost cries resounded. Ghost Lee, who was lurking at the side, immediately understood, and then his face turned angry. The Grass Temple Village tragedy implicated more than 200 innocent lives. So many people died in vain. The depth of resentment. Naturally, it was not a small matter. Just that this place was after all under Qing Yun's sect's eyes. Qing Yun's sect had already sent people down the mountain to this place, cast spells to dispel the evil energy, let many of the spirits who were reluctant to leave return to reincarnation. It was considered as a compensation to Grass Temple Village. Just that for some reason, until today, in this broken temple in Grass Temple Village, there are still so many spirits attached to it. No wonder this place had been abandoned for so many years, overgrown with weeds, but not a single blade of grass grew near this temple. Ghostly was still thinking, but the next moment, that strange black figure seemed to not care about these spirits that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Ordinary people would avoid them. On the contrary, he directly stretched out his hand and simply beckoned. These spirits seemed to know the danger, tried to escape, but like an invisible force, they were all pulled to this mysterious figure. The next moment, in waves of despairing ghost cries, these spirits actually slowly merged into the black energy surrounding that person. For some reason, this scene was seen by Ghostly. His heart suddenly felt like it was on fire. The blood in his entire body seemed to be boiling. An inexplicable rage instantly rushed up to his heart. This was originally his hometown. That Grass Temple Village was originally his childhood playground. The next moment, he had already dashed out. That black figure immediately sensed the abnormality behind him, quickly turned around. When he saw the person and monkey before him, this mysterious figure also seemed to be stunned. Then, from that layer of rolling black energy, his strange laughter seemed to be heard. That voice was low and hoarse, completely inaudible. Ghostly coldly said, "Who are you? Why did you come here, gathering spirits? This is a crime against heaven and reason. Are you not afraid of retribution?" The black energy around that person surged. Suddenly his entire body rolled. His entire body leapt up into the air. Ghostly was shocked, knew that although this person was strange, but his skills were really not to be underestimated. Quickly focused and prepared, unexpectedly that person was actually a feint. With a feint in the air, he turned and swept away. Ghostly coldly snorted, without any hesitation, also leapt into the air and chased closely. Looking at the direction of that person's escape, it seemed to be heading towards the southern wilderness of Hyang City, not far away. Ghostly pursued relentlessly. He wanted to see who exactly was this strange person. As for what was waiting for him, he had never thought about it. But who would seriously think about it? And even if you seriously thought about it, would it be of any use? Maybe this is like the future, no matter what, good or bad. In the end, we have to face it. Chapter 426. Inside the morgue. Following Lu Sueki's sudden appearance, the atmosphere suddenly turned strange. Zhou Yixian frowned, forced a laugh, and said, "Isn't this Qin Yunhil heroine Lu? Why are you also here?" Lu Sueki glanced at Zhou Yixian and then at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai smiled, his eyes rippling. He was also sizing her up. Lu Sueki frowned slightly and then turned her head, spoke to Xiao Huan. "Xiao Huan, miss, that magical weapon you mentioned just now, is it really used by the person who saved you?" Xiao Huan nodded affirmatively, said, "That's right, it is like that. I remember it very clearly." Lu Sueki's expression was uncertain, looked like she was thinking about something, but she did not wait for long, continued to ask, "Then where is that person now? And the other, the devil that you mentioned just now, where is he? What is his identity, do you know?" Xiao Bai, who was standing beside, also revealed a careful expression. Xiao Huan did not think too much, directly said, "That devil's identity and background, I cannot tell, only know that his skills are really unfathomable. But after he captured us, he locked us in these dirty coffins and then disappeared, usually only appear once every 3-5 days. I remember he only came back once yesterday, and then we did not see him again. Most likely we will have to wait for a few more days before he returns." Lu Sueki, oh, her brows seemed to frown even tighter, said, "That person who saved you?" Xiao Huan pointed behind, said, "Isn't he in that coffin at the corner of the house?" Lu Sueki was shocked. Xiao Bai, who was standing beside, also slightly changed countenance. With her skills, she did not notice that there was someone else in that coffin. Lu Sueki nodded, pondered for a moment, walked towards that dark abandoned house. Xiao Huan looked at her figure, could not help but shouted, "Be careful." Lu Sueki paused, turned back and glanced at Xiao Huan, smiled and nodded. Then, she composed herself, stepped onto the moss-covered stone steps. There were only 3 or 5 steps on the stone stairs, so it was only a few steps. It was as dark as usual in the hut, and he could only vaguely see the vague outlines of things. However, other than the faint starlight that shone through the door, there was a large hole that had just been smashed into the wall of this dilapidated house. This way, it was brighter than when Little White came in. Lu Sueki quickly discovered the coffin in the corner of the house. It was the darkest place in the house, far away from the light. She could faintly feel that this was the place with the most yin energy. This was also the reason why the Lich's first reaction was to find this place. Lu Sueki inhaled deeply. Her current cultivation skills, her sect Qing Yun skills were at the point of perfection, and with her intelligence determined aptitude. That day in the western Great Marsh, she and Ghostly memorized the 3rd volume of Tian Shu in her private cultivation had already greatly benefited her. Just that she was usually careful, and not many people could tell her real skills now. And right now, standing in this abandoned morgue, Lu Sueki subconsciously frowned. The yin energy here was so strong, it was out of her expectation, and just a short distance away, when she was standing outside the house, she did not sense it at all. Obviously, there was a skilled person who had laid down a prohibition, forcefully restraining this intense yin energy in this area. Just this level of skills was already not a trivial matter. And the yin energy here was so strong, it was definitely not caused by an ordinary morgue. And the person who laid down such a strange prohibition, who was it? Could it be that she had guessed correctly? Lu Sueki, unknowingly, discovered her palms were slowly sweating. But she was after all not an ordinary person. Her will was strong. Although she was bewildered, but she did not show any fear, only activated her supernatural powers, concentrated and guarded, step by step slowly walked over. In the coffin, the shaman demon and that mysterious fat man were watching Lu Sueki's white figure slowly approaching. The fat man did not have any reaction, only watched. The shaman demon's mind was in a mess, not knowing what Lu Sueki would do after she approached. He had the intention to escape this awkward situation, yet he was helpless. During this period of time, he'd thought of countless methods and tried innumerable crafty techniques. It just so happened that the strange restrictions set up within the coffin just happened to be his nemesis, and it firmly confined the meridians in his entire body to the point he was unable to move, and he was unable to arouse the slightest bit of strength. The shaman demon groaned incessantly, at a loss of what to do, could only keep sighing at his bad luck. Lu Sueki slowly approached that mysterious coffin. The closer she got to that ordinary-looking coffin, her vigilance and a faint trace of shock became more obvious. This coffin was obviously not some unique treasure, and looking at its material, it was at most a medium-grade wood, and more than half of it had decayed. Naturally, it would not be the coffin itself that emitted such strong energy. With her sharp senses, she had indeed discovered that there were indeed 2 people in the coffin at such a close distance. However, there was a faintly discernible dark barrier around the 2 of them, enveloping their bodies. And this layer of yin energy, although 3 chi away from her, but Lu Sueki could already feel the blood in her body indistinctly churning, the cold feeling seeping in. What kind of demonic art, or what kind of unheard of demonic weapon, could have such incredible power? Lu Sueki suppressed the shock, at the same time calmed her mind, suppressed the indistinct restlessness in her body, carefully assessed the coffin, and then slowly stretched out her hand. At the entrance of the small house, Xiao Bai's figure flashed out. She leaned against the doorframe. Her expression relaxed, but her eyes were staring at Lu Sueki's movements. With her skills, when she rescued Zhou Yixian and the other 2, she had already discovered the abnormality of the coffin in the house. The spell that restrained Zhou Yixian and the rest was only an ordinary spell, but the coffin in the corner concealed great danger. Even she did not dare to be rash. Decisively, She first rescued Zhou Yixian and the other two, but did not dare to act rashly towards the coffin. Right now, seeing Lu Sueki standing before that coffin, Xiaobai naturally examined it carefully. And that coffin even had a shaman demon trapped in it. It was the person she wanted, so she couldn't help but concentrated. And on the other side, Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist. The three of them seemed unable to resist the temptation of curiosity, quietly moved to the outside of that big hole, peeking into the house. Inside and outside the morgue suddenly fell into silence. The atmosphere turned strange. Everyone kept quiet out of fear. All stared at Lu Sueki's movements, not daring to be distracted, to the extent that in the distant horizon, a faint black gas rose and revolved in the air. Another figure seemed to be pursuing closely, tangling in the air, yet no one noticed it. Pa! In the darkness, following the slight movement of that white figure, Lu Sueki's slender white hand slowly touched the wooden plank of the coffin, and almost at the same time, this should have been a silent action, suddenly a not so loud but extremely clear sound was heard from inside the coffin. Like a certain wooden plank split open. Lu Sueki's expression changed. She quickly withdrew her hand that touched the wooden board. Just as she was about to withdraw her hand, a ball of black gas suddenly emerged from the place where her palm touched. A hissing sound lingered on. It actually burned like a ghost fire in that small area. There was no fire, but it burned a palm print the size of Lu Sueki's palm on the wooden board. The shaman demon who was trapped in the coffin felt a chill in his heart. The skills that he practiced were similar to this evil power, although the power could not be compared, but when he saw that colorless black fire instantly ignited and then extinguished, his heart still could not help but trembled. The consequences of being burned by that black fire. He could more or less imagine it in his heart, just that he could not understand why, when he was hiding in this coffin, this vicious prohibition did not activate on him. And now that Lu Sueki was here, why was it so sensitive? He was pondering hard in his heart. When he could not figure it out, suddenly he sensed something look down on that mysterious fat man below him. Right now, following the activation of the prohibition, there was a strange change. A gush of thick energy surged out, 100 times stronger than that indistinct energy, immediately filled the coffin they were in. Filling up the coffin they were in, the evil shaman only felt a loud buzz in his head like a blank. Countless cold and sinister energies like poisonous snakes drilled in his body, bitterly biting his meridians, unbearable pain. And yet right now he could not even cry out. For that moment he felt he was better off dead than alive. And the source of this energy was that mysterious fat man's body. Chapter 427. Lu Sueki stared at that black palm print, her face slightly pale. Xiaobai, who was standing far behind her, also slowly straightened her body, no longer leaning on the doorframe, her face solemn. In the next moment, Lu Sueki seemed to feel something. Her body shook. Her expression changed greatly, but she did not retreat or evade. Without any hesitation, flipped her hand. A sound like a dragon's roar. Faint multicolored light floated. Faint blue light for a moment shot out, illuminating the dark house. Tianya, out of its scabbard. Amidst the rising auspicious steam, the autumn water-like long sword reflected Ainan's frost-like face. The sword light was also like water, in the air like the ripples of a pond in autumn. After a slight pause, it transformed into endless sword-light shadows in the air, chopping down towards that coffin. Although it was said to be a slash, it did not seem to have the power to split mountains and break rocks. As the sword light approached, something in the mysterious coffin seemed to feel threatened, and a faint crackling sound began to ring out. A gust of black energy abruptly rose from the coffin, as if it had substance, actually supported Tianya, celestial sword. Lu Sueki's countenance changed slightly. With a clear shout, her body suddenly soared into the air, her white clothes fluttering like a fairy. At the place where she had been standing, within a radius of 3 feet, a hissing sound suddenly rang out. That circular area was shockingly burned beyond recognition by a gust of black gas that had appeared out of nowhere. A burnt stench pervaded the house. Lu Sueki in the air did not panic. Tianya's celestial sword glowed with blue light, drew a small semicircle in the air, stabbed down. Right now, around the coffin, it was already filled with gloomy black energy, rolling like clouds. Not knowing how so much gloomy energy actually appeared in a short period of time. The blue light above like lightning, Tianya glinting and stabbing down. The black energy below did not show any signs of weakness, as if there was an invisible person directing it, gathered in the middle of the coffin, like a black wall blocking in front of Tianya. The moment the celestial sword and the black energy were about to collide, Tianya's sword tip just touched that black energy. Suddenly, like meeting a spring, Lu Sweki's body, like a feather, floated back up. And just when her body floated up, her left hand suddenly pointed together like a knife. In a flash, a faint layer of gold flashed past her eyes, disappeared in a flash, and her palm instead emitted a stream of green light. It was Qing Yun's Sektai Ji Xian Qing Wei, from the side where the black gas was weak, forcefully slashed in. Pong! The black chi suddenly surged, followed by a few muffled sounds, as if something had shattered. Xiao Bai, who was standing at the door, had a faint smile on her face. She nodded slightly in approval. And on the other side, Zhou Yixian, who was standing behind Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, suddenly frowned, as if he had seen something suspicious, his eyes uncertain, and then fell into deep thoughts. Ainin Sweki's unexpected sneak attack was successful. The black gas seemed to have not expected it. In anger, it immediately changed from defense to offense. A black mass, like a layer of dark clouds, rushed towards the white figure in midair. Lu Sweki paused in the air. The strong wind hit her. Her hair fluttered. Without a moment of hesitation, that figure seemed to be carried by an invisible force. Immediately flew out. A scene that did not match with her figure. The entire morgue's abandoned roof was instantly blasted apart. Wood fragments fell, dust like rain. Only that white figure, like a faint floating cloud, charged up to the sky, under the faint starlight in the horizon, looked even more elegant and unrestrained. The black energy barely chased up to 1 zhang high, looked like it had lost its strength. The night wind blew past, in a short while immediately dispersed this black energy. Lu Sweki paused slightly in the air. A clear whistle again dived down toward that small house. Right now, Xiao Bai had already leapt out from the door, clasped her hands behind, and watched from afar, while Zhou Yixian and the rest looked much more wretched, busy dodging the countless rotten wood and rubbish that suddenly fell from the sky. In the chaos, Lu Sweki's figure had once again dashed into that house. Her clear and crisp voice, suddenly heard, the blue light in the house flourished, divided into numerous beams, and shot out from the house. The next moment, a loud explosion in the house. Indistinctly, Lu Sweki's joyful voice called out, "Tian teacher uncle, it really is you." Zhou Yixian and the rest stood far away. After making sure they would not be hit by the things that fell down, they then looked back. The extremely chaotic house had already calmed down. After a while, that dazzling blue light also slowly disappeared. Then from the door, a person walked out first. This person was not Lu Sweki, but a mysterious person in black. Even his face was covered, unable to see clearly. Zhou Yixian and the rest did not know this person. Xiao Bai instead snorted. Without seeing how she moved, she suddenly appeared before the evil shaman, blocking the evil shaman's path. The evil shaman glanced at Xiao Bai, with a bitter laugh, stopped. After another moment, footsteps were heard from the house. This time, there were 2 people at the door, and it was Lu Sweki supporting a haggard-looking fat man, slowly walking out. Xiao Huan and the rest saw clearly. This fat man was the one who saved their lives from the devil. Just that in this haste, after being imprisoned in the coffin for so many days for some reason, this fat man seemed to have become even fatter. Lu Sweki supported this fat man, let him sit down on the stone steps in front of the house. She quietly said, "Tian teacher uncle, are you all right?" When the rest heard her words, they were slightly startled. Lu Sweki's identity, they naturally all knew, and hearing how she addressed this fat man. Could it be that this person was also from Qing Yun's sect? And from the looks of it, he seemed to be an elder generation with high seniority. This fat man was naturally Big Bamboo Valley Head, the one who mysteriously disappeared with Qin Yun's sect head, Reverend Daoxian, Tian Bui. Tian Bui glanced at Lu Sueki, nodded, but did not say anything. Lu Sueki was intelligent, immediately understood, and did not say anything, just that for some reason, her heart was thumping wildly. That feeling of nervousness, right now, became even stronger. Tian Bui was here. Then, that more important person, where was he now? Could it be that devil that Xiao Huan and the rest were talking about? This thought quickly flashed past Lu Sueki's mind. For some reason, there was a slight prickling pain on her back. The evil shaman stood aside. His eyes landed on Tian Bui, looked deeply at that fat man. This was the first time he saw Tian Bai's face clearly. Just that when he looked at Tian Bui, a strange glint flashed past in his eyes. But he did not have much time to observe others. After a moment, Xiao Bai's voice was already reverberating beside his ears. "Where's the thing I want?" The Lich Demon's heart skipped a beat. He laughed bitterly and turned to Xiao Bai, who was standing in front of him. "I have already told you." Xiao Bai, with a sound, said, "The southern border is thousands of miles away. Don't tell me I still have to run over for your words. Who knows if it's true or not? I advise you obediently hand over the thing I want." The evil shaman pondered for a moment. His face was masked. Others could not see his expression, but could tell he was thinking about something. Xiao Bai impatiently said, "What kind of person I am? It's not like you don't know I am different from that Funxiang Valley old ghost. That day when your master was here, he also promised to give me that thing." The evil shaman silently nodded. As if Xiao Bai's words moved him, he unhurriedly walked to Xiao Bai, lowered his voice, said a few words. Xiao Bai suddenly frowned, said, "Really?" The evil shaman indifferently said, "It is not your first time coming into contact with shaman skills. Southern border ancient shaman tribe have some taboos you more or less know." Xiao Bai pondered for a moment, nodded, said, "All right, I will believe you this time. If you dare to lie to me, sooner or later I will find you and teach you a lesson." The evil shaman bitterly laughed, shook his head. Xiao Bai then turned and looked at the rest. Finally, her eyes landed on Lu Sueki. Coincidentally, Lu Sueki was also looking at her. Xiao Bai suddenly smiled. Her lips and brows carried an indescribable charm, but without a trace of lasciviousness. Instead, it increased her beauty, smiled, and said, "Miss Lu, we have not seen each other for a long time." Lu Sueki expressionlessly looked at Xiao Bai, only faintly nodded. Xiao Bai's smile deepened, said, "Not sure if you have seen him recently?" Lu Sueki frowned, coldly snorted. Her expression turned cold. Xiao Bai looked at her expression, suddenly covered her mouth, and then shook her head, strode away, and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. Chapter 4:28. A coughing sound came from the side. The sound was not loud, but it seemed to be hurried. Everyone looked towards the direction of the sound and saw Tian Bui sitting on the stone steps, his face showing a trace of pain, coughing nonstop. Ainin frowned slightly. His eyes revealed a trace of worry. With Tian Bai's previous skills, he had already reached the stage of being immune to all diseases. Not to mention this small cough. Obviously, Tian Bai's body most likely had some kind of injury. Ainin pondered and did not speak. Tani, who was standing at the side, instead quietly walked up. Tian Bai was slightly surprised, looked up at Tani. Tani smiled, said, "This, senior, thank you for saving me my grandfather and priest a few days ago." Tian Bai's face revealed a little smile, and his tiredness lightly said, "Just a small matter, not worth mentioning. Just that this place is inauspicious, not a place for you all to stay for long. If there is nothing else, better leave quickly." Tanis Khan nodded repeatedly, said, Yes, what he said is very right. Tani, let's leave quickly." Tani rolled her eyes at her grandfather, said to Tian Bai, "Senior, is your body all right? What do you need my help with?" Tian Bai shook his head, said, "I am fine. All of you just leave. If that person comes back, I'm afraid all of you will not have such good luck to escape." After speaking, suddenly a trace of black indistinctly flashed past his fat face. His face again revealed a painful expression, uncontrollably coughed again, and his voice seemed to be hoarser than before. The evil shaman standing alone at the side. His eyes were staring at Tian Bai, watching his every movement. On his face covered by the black cloth, only a pair of eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. Tani could not stand Tanizka's urging. At the same time, it seemed that she could not help much. So she bowed her head and bid farewell to Tian Bai, and then followed Tanizka and Wild Dog Taoist out. But after a few steps, she could not help but look at the evil shaman standing at the side, as if she had discovered something. Startled, said to Tanizka, "Grandpa, look at that person. Why is he dressed exactly the same as that teacher?" Tanizka didn't react for a moment, said in surprise, "What master?" Pausing for a moment, Tanizka squinted his eyes, looked at the lich demon, pondered for a moment, said, "There are too many weird people and monsters in this world. It is hard to say how many of them are similar to that mystifying master. Ignore him. We better leave quickly." Tani acknowledged and followed, but could not help but turn back to look at the shaman. The shaman seemed to not notice the three of them, only stood there silently, watching Tian Bui. Soon, Tanizka, Xiaohuan, and Wild Dog Taoist also left this abandoned morgue. This desolate place suddenly became even more deserted, and Tian Bui and Ainan's attention very quickly also looked at that mysterious black-attired man. Tian Belize said lightly, "Is there anything else?" The evil shaman was silent for a while. His eyes moved from Tian Bui to Ainan and finally back to Tian Bui. After a while, he seemed to want to speak, but eventually did not say a word. His body floated backwards, quietly blended into the darkness of the night. The night breeze was cold, blowing from afar. The entire morgue, for a moment there was no sound. Even the usual insects in the wilderness were not heard. Dead silence. Ainan, for some reason, suddenly felt a sense of uneasiness. Tian Bui looked up at the sky. For a long while, seemed to be thinking about something. Ainan did not know why he was suddenly in a daze, did not dare to disturb. But after a long while, Tian Bui did not make any movements, and worried if Tian Bui was injured or not. Was about to ask, Tian Bui suddenly lowered his head, followed by a bout of coughing more violently than before. Ainan was startled, did not know what to do, could only ask, "Tian teacher uncle, are you all right?" Tian Bui coughed for a long while, then slowly stopped. Seemed like he had caught his breath. He slowly shook his hand, indicating that he was fine. Ainan still could not help but said, "Tian teacher uncle, this place is not far from our Qinyan Hill. I think we better return to Qinyan first. After meeting the various teachers, then we could discuss further." Tian Bui heard Ainan's words, frowned, seemed to suddenly recall something, turned and looked at Ainan, said, "During the time I was away at Big Bamboo Valley, and your Sura teacher uncle, are they all right?" Ainan nodded and said, "They're all fine, just that everyone did not know where Tian teacher uncle went, so they were all very anxious." Tian Bui smiled, as if a huge stone had been lifted from his heart, just that in that smile, indistinctly revealed a trace of bitterness. Ainan saw Tian Bai's expression, hesitated for a moment, probingly said, "Tian teacher uncle, just now those people said, you confronted a devil. Who is that devil?" Tian Bui glanced at Ainan, frowned, and did not speak. Ainan met his gaze, suddenly discovered that on this Tian teacher uncle's face, other than haggard, there seemed to be a trace of black energy that should not appear on his body, faintly discernible. Could it be that his meridians were injured by that strange, evil spell that imprisoned him? Ainan was secretly worried, but there was another more important matter in front of her. She had to face it. She hesitated for a moment, finally still quietly but clearly asked Tian Bui, "That person, is it sect head Daoxian teacher uncle?" Tian Bai's body shook. His eyes suddenly shot out a frightening glint, coldly said, "What did you say?" Ainan hurriedly said, "Before disciple left the mountain, disciple received teacher's trust, told the past events of her, Tian teacher uncle, Su teacher uncle and founder's ancestral hall." Tian Bui was stunned for a moment, astonishment on his face, but then he finally calmed down. After a long while, he heaved a long sigh, said, "Didn't expect Shui Wei actually told you." Ainan said, "Teacher because sect head, Daoxian teacher uncle and Tian teacher uncle you disappeared at the same time. Qin Yun sect was in a mess, and she was very worried that Daoxian teacher uncle was already trapped by the heart devil. But Xiao Yikai's senior brother clearly did not know about this, so she had no choice but to make a decision. Let her guard Qingyun Hill, and order Disciple to go down the mountain to look for both of you. Tian Bui was silent for a moment, said, if you found Sect Head Reverend at the foot of the mountain, and if he was really like what your teacher worried about, did Shuiwa tell you? What should you do? Ainan's face turned slightly pale, as if this secret to her was also a great burden. Under Tian Bai's gaze, she took a deep breath, resolutely said, before Disciple went down the mountain, Disciple had already gone with teacher to Tongtian Peak Founder's Ancestral Hall, in front of Qin Yun's sect ancestors' memorial tablets, made a solemn oath. If it really cannot be done, for Qin Yun's sect's 1,000 years of reputation, Disciple will fight to the death, without mercy, and will never reveal a single bit of this matter. Tianbi looked deeply at Ainan. In the end, nodded slowly, but let out a long sigh. Although I do not like Shuiwe's character, but I have to say, she really taught a good disciple. Ainan, expressionless, lowered her head, said, Tian teacher uncle, you praise me too much. Tian Bui lightly said, among the second-generation disciples in Qingyun's sect, there are no less than 1,000 of them. Looking at them, how many of them can shoulder such a heavy responsibility? Sigh. He was silent for a while, and continued, you guessed correctly, the person I fought with here a few days ago was your sect head teacher, Uncle Daoxian. Ainan, although had already vaguely guessed it, but hearing Tian Bui say it with her own ears, her body still could not help but trembled. After a long while, she quietly said, that sect head teacher uncle, his elderly body. Tian Bui snorted, shook his head, sighed and said, he has already sunk deep into the mud, unable to extricate himself. Lu Sueki remained silent. Tian Bui paused, continued, the twists and turns, it's a long story, but since you already know the whole story, I have nothing to hide from you. That day, I first discovered that Daoxian's senior brother indeed had some signs of being possessed by the devil. So I went up to Tongtian Peak, and in the end of Founder's Ancestral Hall, I really discovered that he was really... Afterwards in that Founder's Ancestral Hall, we fought, just that although he was possessed by the devil, his skills did not weaken much. In the end, after a round of fighting, I was still subdued by him. Lu Sueki was listening at the side. She was secretly shocked. Tian Bui and Reverend Daoxian's cultivation level. She knew and had seen it with her own eyes. These two Qin Yun sect top figures fighting at Tongtian Peak Rear Mountain. The intensity of the battle could be imagined. Although right now Tian Bui seemed to downplay it, but the scene at that time was not difficult to imagine. Tian Bai's face revealed a trace of a bitter smile, said, when I went that day, I was already prepared. It would be best if I could awaken Daoxian's senior brother. If it really doesn't work, I could only try my best. That year at Founder's Ancestral Hall, when your teacher Shiwei and I eavesdropped on this secret, we heard one senior brother said, after being possessed by the devil, because of the evil energy entering the body, the essence would be damaged, and the first mate would deteriorate. I naturally knew Daoxian's senior brother's skills were deeper than mine. What I was thinking was just in case to perish together with him. After all, this matter must not be spread out. Ainan's heart was filled with respect. Sincerely said, Tian teacher uncle's heart, the sun and moon can attest, the generations of ancestors will definitely protect you. Tian Bui shook his head, said, who knew after I fought with Daoxian's senior brother, I discovered that although he was possessed by the devil, his skills were still as deep as before. After a few fierce battles, I was still defeated and captured. Just that for some reason, he did not have the intention to kill me. Instead, he secretly brought me down the mountain, came to this ghostly, abandoned morgue, and imprisoned me here. Ainan was reminded by his words, hurriedly asked, then Tian teacher, uncle, are you injured? You look very pale. Tian Belize startled for a moment, as if he did not understand the meaning of Ainan's words. But then he understood, with a hint of self-mockery said, who was stuffed into that coffin, locked up for so many days, naturally will not have a good complexion. Ainan frowned, still felt uneasy, but for the moment could not pinpoint what was wrong, could only remain silent. Chapter 429. Tian Bui glanced at her, said, you roughly know about this matter. What plan do you have now? Anan frowned tightly, said, I asked Tian teacher uncle that. Daoxian teacher uncle, where is he now? Tian Bui shook his head, said, after he turned evil. The way he does things is completely unpredictable. Often he would leave us alone, leave for a few days before returning. Calculating, he just left this morgue yesterday. I'm afraid it will be another few days before he returns, but it is also hard to say. Occasionally he will return the next day. Lu Sweki hesitated for a moment, said, Tian teacher uncle, why don't we return to the mountain first? Although this matter should not be publicized, but as long as we find my teacher and Suru teacher uncle, you three teachers discuss together, I think there will be a better way. Tian Bui was silent for a moment, but eventually shook his head and said, not appropriate. Firstly, Daoxian senior brother is now deeply into the devil. His mind has changed greatly. What he will do, nobody can predict. Secondly, if this time when we return to the mountain, we lose track of him, then what should we do? He paused, said, how about this? Why don't you return first? Inform Shuiwe and Suru teacher uncle what happened. Ask them to come quickly. Anan hesitated, said, then if Daoxian teacher uncle returns tonight, then what should we do? Tian Bui smiled faintly, did not speak immediately, instead slowly stood up. He was short and stout. His looks were not outstanding, but for some reason, just by standing there casually, there was an imposing aura, awe-inspiring in the wind, making others respect him. A lifetime of cultivation, what is it for? Tian Bui quietly said, a man's body. How can he be timid in the face of battle? Anan also quietly stood up behind him. All along, in her eyes, other than being that person's teacher, Tian Bui seemed to have nothing else worthy of her attention. But right now, she really admired this senior teacher uncle from the bottom of her heart. She clenched her teeth, loudly said, Tian teacher uncle, you have just escaped, still need to meditate and recuperate. Tonight, I will guard you. Tomorrow morning, I will rush back to Qingyun. Inform teacher and Suru teacher uncle to leave the mountain. If by any chance Daoxian teacher uncle really returns tonight, Tian Belize was surprised, glanced at Anan, said, how is it? Lu Sweki smiled. Her face looked even more elegant in the night breeze, said, among the Qingyun disciples, it is not only Tian Shuyu who can face death with equanimity. Tian Belize gazed at Anan for a long time, then clapped his hands and smiled. Well said, well said, well said. Facing death with equanimity. Lu Sweki smiled faintly and said, Tian Shu, you better sit down and rest. Tian Bui did not speak much, only nodded, sat back on the moss-covered stone steps, closed his eyes. Lu Sweki looked around. The night was cold, the wind was howling, not to mention a human figure. It was hard to even find a ghost. The night was deep. Who knew what kind of day tomorrow would bring? She did not want to think too much, also sat down below Tian Bui, closed her eyes. After sitting like that for a long time, Lu Sweki's state of mind gradually became clear. Although she did not open her eyes, but the energy flow in her body, she seemed to be able to feel every blade of grass and every tree, as if she was seeing it with her own eyes. She felt comforted. These days, she was often in turmoil and also tasted the pain of yearning, but her cultivation seemed to have improved and did not waste. Just that she then discovered, although her spiritual sense was like this, but for some reason, Tian Bui, who had been sitting beside her, her spiritual sense seemed to have no effect on him. She could not even sense his heartbeat. Lu Sweki immediately had another surge of respect for Tian Bui. Seemed like these Qingyun elders. All of them really had amazing skills. While she was thinking, suddenly she heard Tian Bai's voice, said, Lu teacher nephew. Lu Sweki opened her eyes, said, Tian teacher uncle. You can call me Sweki. Tian Bui looked at her. A glint flashed in his eyes. Seemed to have deep meaning. Slowly nodded, said Sweki. Lu Sweki smiled and said, Yes, Tian teacher uncle, what's the matter? Tian Bai's eyes moved away from her, did not speak immediately. Anan felt strange. Tian Bai's eyes seemed to be drifting, looking in an unknown place. After a long while, he suddenly said, You and that good-for-nothing seventh disciple of mine in the past. Are you acquainted? Lu Sweki was startled. For a moment, Even she who was always calm felt a loss. Even under her fair cheeks, two faint pink patches inexplicably flew up, forcefully suppressing her racing heartbeat. Lu Sweki forced herself to calm down, but her expression was still a little embarrassed and shy. Quietly said, "Yes, Tian Shirshu? Why did you suddenly ask about this?" Tian Bai's face was expressionless, unable to tell whether he was happy or angry, as if he was talking about something unimportant to him. Indifferently said, "I heard that these few years when you were walking at the foot of the mountain, your friendship with Lao Chi is not shallow. And because of Lao Chi, you were punished several times by your teacher. There was even one time, in front of everyone, in front of Daoxian's senior brother and your teacher, you rejected Fun Xiang Valley, Master's personal marriage proposal." Ainen at the moment completely did not understand why Tian Bui suddenly said these words, but her face was burning. Most likely it was blushing. Her heart was even more flustered. It seemed that talking about this matter in front of this Tian Bui, who was always a stranger, made her even more flustered than her respected teacher, Shiwe. "Yes." Lu Sweki stuttered hesitantly for the first time. She paused for a long time before saying in a low voice, "But I didn't reject the marriage proposal entirely because of him. I didn't like it. So, Tian Bui suddenly cut her off, directly asked, 'Do you like my seventh?'" Lu's mind buzzed, felt her face was burning hot. She looked at Tian Bui, saw Tian Bai's bright eyes, staring at her. Under that gaze, Lu suddenly did not know where the courage came from, abruptly sat up straight, took a deep breath, looked straight at Tian Bui, in a clear, crisp, clean voice said, "Yes." This voice was like cutting through ice and snow, clear and melodious, without any hesitation, like her clear eyes, without any impurities. Tian Bai's mouth drew back, laughed out loud. His laughter was unrestrained, but it was heartfelt joy. Lu heard him laughing, instead felt a wave of shyness, but unknowingly, her feeling towards this short and fat teacher uncle instead became even more intimate, until Tian Bai's laughter gradually subsided, when he once again looked at Ainen Sweki. Ainen Sweki then smiled faintly, but then a wave of inexplicable sadness quietly said, "Pity that he is now. I'm afraid the teachers cannot tolerate him anymore. If he could return to Qingyun, how great would that be?" Tian Bui rolled his eyes, coldly said, "What return? I never said that I have already chased this good-for-nothing guy out." Lu was surprised, for a moment did not understand what Tian Bui meant, looked up at him. Tian Bui indifferently said, "I know. Aren't you just worried about your teacher?" Lu lowered her head, after a long while said, "Teacher is also doing it for my own good, and she's also not wrong. The one who is wrong is me, I understand." Tian Bui suddenly spat. This somewhat rude action startled Lu. Looked up at Tian Bui. Tian Bui rolled his eyes and glanced at the direction of Qingyun Hill, said, "I just feel that teacher of yours is really becoming more and more like that Zhan Yun grand teacher grandma of yours. Can't even figure out herself, and still meddle in everything, but also especially like to meddle in the disciples' thoughts. Don't tell me she's also like her teacher, senile." Lu said, "Tian teacher uncle, why are you talking nonsense?" Tian Belize glanced at Ainen, chuckled, then waved his hand, said, "Don't worry, after this is over, I will take care of your matters." Lu startled, said, "What?" Tian Bui sneered, said, "Not only you, you still have a senior sister called Wenmin, right?" Lu Sweki nodded and said, "Yes, Wenmin's senior sister. She's actually on good terms with Big Bamboo Valley Song Darren's senior brother." Speaking till here, she couldn't help but reveal a smile. Tian Bui glared at her, said, "Xavion is also a wooden fish head." Lu burst out laughing, said, "When our Wenmin senior sister talked to us privately about Song's senior brother, she always said so." Tian Bui shook his head, seemed to be dissatisfied with that simple and honest eldest disciple, not knowing if it was because Xavion embarrassed him, then said, "Don't worry. In the future I will personally go to Small Bamboo Valley for my two good-for-nothings to ask for your teacher's hand in marriage." Once the words were out, Lu immediately blushed. It was really something she had never done before. In a moment of desperation, she could only say, "Tian teacher uncle," If you tease disciple like this again, I will be angry. Tian Bui glanced at her, said, I am speaking the truth. When did I tease you? Unless you are not willing to marry our Lao Chi? Lu hurriedly said, No. Oh no, I don't mean that. I am. Tian Bai's eyes blinked a few times on his chubby face, said seriously, Then what do you mean? Lu for a moment choked, didn't know what to say. Her face was not sure if it was anxiety or shyness. Under her fair skin was a patch of pink, adding a kind of soul-stirring beauty. Tian Bui smiled, said, All right, I won't say much. I see you're also a smart girl. What I mean, you should understand, right? Lu Sweki breathed deeply, slowly calmed down. Just that on her beautiful face, there was still a faint rouge-like color, but her eyes were already as clear and bright as before. After a moment, she slowly and firmly nodded, said, Yes, disciple understands. Tian Bui stared at her, then asked, Are you willing? The blush on Lu Sweki's face deepened, but this time she was calm. Like before, said, Yes. Chapter 430. Tian Bui heaved a long sigh, a smile on his face. But Anan was after all a meticulous person. After pondering for a moment, looked at Tian Bui, said, Tian teacher uncle, what you mean just now? Is he can return to Qingyun? Tian Bui snorted, said, 10 years ago at Qingyun Hill, the truth was revealed. Lao Chi ran away. After that I pondered over it several times, but felt that Lao Chi really had nothing to do with it. He did not do anything wrong. In the end, he actually, by a free combination of factors, inexplicably left Qingyun. I have only taken in 7 disciples in my life, although all of them are useless. But if you want me to casually pretend that this never happened and muddle-headedly pretend that I have never taken in this disciple and not care about it, it is also impossible. Anan was like a person who had been in the dark for a long time, suddenly saw a faint light ahead. Right now, she was really surprised and delighted. Tian Bui continued, I also know if I really do this, I'm afraid there will be many twists and turns. But these 10 years I've been keeping an eye on Lao Chi. At least he still has a conscience. I have not heard that he has done anything against heaven and reason. Anan hurriedly said, That's right. I have also been keeping an eye on him, but I have never heard that after he joined the evil sect, he had any misdeeds. Speaking till the end, she found Tian Bui looking at her with a smile, yet not a smile. Her face blushed. Her voice gradually quieted down. Tian Bui nodded, said, You are also considered a conscientious person. These 10 years, I think you must have had a hard time. Anan was silent. Tian Bui coughed a few times, seemed to be out of breath, then said, Anyway, as long as he still recognizes me as his teacher, then his matter, no. He glanced at Anan, smiled, and said, Your matter. I can never ignore it. Anan gently bit her lips. After a moment, slightly lowered her head, quietly said, Disciple thanks teacher, uncle. Tian Bui nodded, but couldn't help but cough for a while. It seemed that the sudden conversation just now, besides making him happy, seemed to be a little tired, and the layer of black hair on his face seemed to have thickened. Lu Sweki couldn't help but worry, said, Tian Shu, you better not talk too much for now. Take a rest first. Speaking, she looked up at the sky and said, I see the sky. At most it will be dawn in another 4 hours. Then I will rush back to Qingyun Hill and inform teacher and Suru teacher uncle. Tian Belize nodded, closed his eyes again. Lu Sweki took a deep breath, calmed herself down, and closed her eyes. But at the same time, the corners of her mouth still revealed a faint smile. That was a happy smile that belonged only to her. In the distant horizon, there was a faint starlight peeking out from the thick clouds, like the innocent eyes of a young girl. Soon after, the wind blew, and a dark cloud floated over, once again covering it up. Beneath the clouds, 2 streaks of light streaked across the sky, heading in their direction. Taniska, together with Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, hurriedly left this abandoned moor which to them was extremely unlucky, walked towards the main road. Taniska was old. Right now his footsteps were much faster than the young lads. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist even found it difficult to keep up. After walking for a long time, the road ahead finally became clear. Xiao Huan, who was slightly out of breath, said, "Grandpa, are you tired? Why are you walking so fast?" Tanizka looked at the main road not far ahead, and then looked back at the direction of the moor, which was already out of sight, then heaved a sigh of relief, stopped, said, "What do you know, this time we're really lucky, escaped from death, if we still don't know what's good for us and stay further away from that morgue. Isn't it asking for trouble?" Xiao Huan paused, recalled what happened in the moor these few days, especially when she thought of that mysterious sorcerer. She still had lingering fear, shook her head, said, "Didn't expect that at the foot of Qing Yun Hill there would be such a powerful, evil sorcerer." Tanizka suddenly sneered, said, "If it wasn't at the foot of Qing Yun Hill, you wouldn't have seen it." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, who was standing beside, were stunned, said, "What?" Tanizka frowned, seemed to recall something, knew he had made a slip of the tongue, looked left and right, waved his hand and said, "All right, let's quickly leave this place, enter the city earlier. When we reach the crowded place, we won't have to be afraid." Xiao Huan looked strangely at Tanizka. Tanizka ignored her, walked ahead. Xiao Huan hurried a few steps, came to Tanizka, was about to ask. Unexpectedly, Tanizka coughed, looked up at the sky, said, "Xiao Huan, tonight's night is not bad, right?" Xiao Huan spat at him, said, "This dark and windy night, eerie night, you still dare to say the night is good?" Tanizka laughed dryly, walked forward a few steps. Xiao Huan suspiciously looked at her grandpa's back, felt that Tanizka was obviously not telling the truth. While the three of them were walking, they suddenly heard a gust of wind behind them. A black shadow was rapidly catching up from behind them. Tanizka, Xiao Huan, Wild Dog Taoist were shocked. For a moment, they all had the same thought. Don't tell me, in such a short time, the devil had already caught up? The three of them looked back, were surprised, although the person was also dressed in black, but he was not that mysterious evil man, but the mysterious evil man in black that they had met not long ago. The evil shaman naturally saw the three of them, just that he did not mind. When he passed by them, he did not slow down. Obviously, he also wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Just that when he was about to pass by, suddenly a female voice was heard, shouted, "Wait." The shaman demon was stunned, his figure twisted in the air, stopped, looked back, saw the two males among the three, had a shocked expression, looking at the young lady in the middle, and the young lady seemed to be stunned, for a moment did not speak. The evil shaman assessed Xiao Huan, said, "Miss, is it you who call me?" Xiao Huan hesitated for a moment, said, "Yes." The evil shaman said, "What's the matter?" Xiao Huan paused for a moment. She suddenly called out to this man, not for any other reason, just because she subconsciously felt that this person's clothes were too similar to her mysterious teacher, whom she had only met twice. If not for their completely different auras, the evil shaman did not have Mr. Ghost's unique, eerie, ghostly energy. She would have called him teacher. Just that right now, when the evil shaman asked, Xiao Huan for a moment did not know where to start, paused for a while, and then asked awkwardly, "This may I ask, mister, do you know another person who is dressed the same as you?" The evil shaman was stunned for a moment, shook his head and said, "I don't know." Xiao Huan frowned, was about to speak, but Tanizka pulled her heavily, pulled her behind him, smiled to the black-attired evil shaman, said, this young lady is not sensible. Please don't mind her." Speaking, he stared fiercely at Xiao Huan, pulled Xiao Huan and left. Wild Dog Taoist saw them leaving and quickly followed. Xiao Huan looked embarrassed, but she still forced herself to say, "Grandpa, what are you doing?" Tanizka snorted, said, "Are you looking for trouble?" Xiao Huan's voice softened, quietly looked back at the evil shaman, saw that the man was still standing there. She could not help but whisper to Tanizka, "But they are really too similar." Tanizka ignored her, clutched her even tighter, and strode towards the distant road. Watching the three of them walking further away, Xiao Huan's mumbling could still be heard indistinctly in the wind. The evil shaman for a moment felt bewildered. After a long while, he gave a bitter laugh, shook his head, and turned to leave. Just that his body had just moved slightly when he suddenly turned back and faced the direction of the abandoned morgue. His eyes flashed and stared fixedly at it. Following the direction of his gaze in the distant sky, could indistinctly see two figures, one in front and one behind, dashing towards that morgue. Chapter 431. The evil shaman hesitated for a moment, finally dispelled his curiosity, shook his head, turned, and floated away. In his intuition, that morgue was definitely not a good place to go. Better not to go. At this moment, the abandoned morgue was still shrouded in silence. Lusweki slowly opened her eyes and looked around with her clear and bright eyes. Seeing that the surroundings were quiet and there was nothing unusual, she then relaxed. Tian Bui was still the same as before, sitting cross-legged on the stone steps with his eyes closed. Occasionally the night breeze would blow past, but for some reason it could not move his clothes, as if all the wind bypassed his body. Ainen was suddenly moved, as if she thought of something strange. Her brows also frowned slightly. Her eyes instead landed on Tian Bai's body. After watching for a while, the doubt in her eyes became more and more apparent. Ever since she rescued Tian Bui from that coffin, Ainen discovered that this big Bamboo Valley Tian teacher uncle, who she had not seen for a long time, was much fatter than in her memory. But the face shape did not change, but it seemed that this short and fat body was twice as big as before, so much so that looking at it now, the clothes on his body seemed to be somewhat tight. Just that, for some reason, although Tian Bai wanted to put on weight, but Ainen felt that there was something wrong with Tian Bai's fatness. But for the moment she could not tell what was wrong. She could not help but felt worried. Although she used Tian Shu's magical powers to break the coffin's prohibition, but after a few simple exchanges, she was still quite shocked by the strange evil power that was restraining Tian Bai. The evil power was so strong and strange. It was something she had never seen before. Thinking of this, Ainen felt that she should ask Tian Bai clearly. After making up her mind, she turned and was about to speak. Unexpectedly at this moment, Tian Bai, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes glinting, but he did not look at Ainen. His face slightly twisted, staring at the night sky like deep ink. Ainen's heart shivered, stood up, looked up. The next moment her body also shook. Above the dark firmament, a black figure like a gust of wind flew down, wrapped in a ball of black gas. Before it arrived, that surging evil power seemed to have already surged over. Tian Bai slowly stood up. Ainen felt her mouth was dry. Quietly said, "Is it him?" Tian Bai slowly nodded, quietly said, "It is him." Ainen's eyes never left that black figure, only sighed softly and did not speak again. Only Tianya in her hand, glowing, quietly glowed. "Who?" A whistling sound in the wind. That black figure descended from the sky, landed in the morgue, and then saw Tian Bui and Ainen standing at the door, seemed to be startled for a moment, but did not show any fear after a moment, instead made a strange laugh. Lusweki fixed her eyes on that person, only to see that his entire body was shrouded in a thick layer of rolling black gas. Completely unable to see his figure and face, and just from a few laughs he let out, she could not tell that this voice belonged to the kind and prudent sect head teacher uncle in her impression. That mysterious person assessed Tian Bai and Ainen, and finally glanced at Tianya in Ainen's hand, suddenly said, "It was you saved you." Tian Bai snorted, did not answer, only glanced a few more times at that mysterious person. His eyes filled with anger, could not help but took a step forward. Ainen was expressionless, but also took 2 steps to the other direction. For a moment she and Tian Bai formed a triangle, facing that mysterious person. Tian Bai's cultivation, needless to say, even Ainen, with her current cultivation, she could boast about herself in the world, just that that mysterious person was extremely arrogant, did not even put them in his eyes, instead laughed out loud. That laughter was hoarse and deep, resounding in this abandoned morgue in the dead of night, like a ghost's wail and wolf's howl. "Tian Bai, you still dare to fight me?" Tian Bai said gravely. "You are too possessed. I can only fight." That person sneered, said, "You said I am possessed. How do you know it is not? Because you can't see through it." Tian Bai raised his right hand. Immediately light swirled. His esper crimson flame was already in his hand. Like a fire burning in his hand, he said word by word, "Your occult ghost energy don't know how many innocent lives and lonely souls. What else do you have to say?" After the words occult ghost energy reached Ainen's ears, She could not help but slightly changed. Shock flashed across her face. As far as she knew, this strange, evil technique, called Xianing Ghost Qi, was not a supernatural power of the devil cult, but a strange technique of the ghost path that had been lost for many years. It completely relied on demonic arts to absorb the essence of living people and ghost Qi. So it could be imagined how sinister it was. Just that this kind of strange, evil art, why would it appear on this person? It was really unimaginable. That mysterious person's black gas surged. From it came a few more sneers. Seemed to be about to say something, but then stopped, slightly turned, looked at the sky behind him. Tian Bai and Anan also felt it. Looked over, their faces changed slightly. In midair, a silhouette came crashing down from above. His momentum was like thunder. Before the person arrived, the wind had already arrived. The slightly smaller stones on the ground had already begun to roll slowly. With such power, one could imagine the cultivation level of the person who came. That night, the morgue was filled with people from all over the world. Just that, life is full of twists and turns after coincidences. See, unlike the mysterious figure, even though he came with a menacing aura, when he landed, he seemed to be able to do so with ease. Only a sharp whistling sound broke the silence of this place. When he landed on the ground, he stealthily turned half a circle before he steadied himself without making a sound. He turned his head to look at the battlefield. The next moment, he was stunned. Anan was stunned. Tian Bai was also stunned. Like a gush of hot blood, suddenly burning in his chest, Ghost Li's body involuntarily swayed slightly. In front of him, less than 10 zhang away from where he was standing, a short fat man was standing there. Although his face looked gray and his body strangely swollen, but no matter what, Ghostly could still recognize who he was at one glance. That was the person who had raised him since young, passed on his skills to him. The teacher whom he respected the most since young. He opened his mouth slightly, but could not make any sound. 10 years, it was like there were thousands of words in his heart. But at this moment, it turned into silence. Tian Bai looked deeply at Ghostly. No, who cares about that damned Ghostly? The person he was looking at was only his 7th good-for-nothing disciple, that Zhang Xiao fan. 10 years had passed. That young man was no longer young. Even the hairs on his temples were faintly visible. Most likely these 10 years, he must have had a hard time. It was not that Tian Bai never thought of meeting this disciple who rebelled against Qin Yun again. He even thought of reprimanding him, and then teaching him, hoping that he would repent. Just that at this moment, maybe he was really old, the reprimanding words that he once thought of, he could not say a single word. His slightly trembling lips at the end only turned into a faint smile, and then softly called out, "Lao Chi." In Ghost Li's mind, a loud roar, this simple 2 words, it was like instantly smashed all the walls in his heart. Everything in the past flashed before his eyes. On the verdant and beautiful big bamboo peak, the rustling sound of bamboo waves seemed to come. He was stunned, dumbfounded, his body slightly trembling. Even the monkey Xiao Hui who was crawling on his shoulder also rarely made sound. The burning feeling in his throat, a warmth that he had not felt for many years, not so long ago. That was his most precious memory. Right now, that person was standing there, calling him. Teacher. In that instant, he seemed to have returned to the past. That ordinary young man who did not care about anything. For the excitement that was like fire burning in his chest, he shouted out. Glistening tears at the corner of his eyes, quietly flashing. Chapter 432. TSK Tisk. A burst of hoarse, strange laughter was emitted from that mysterious person. For a moment startled everyone. Teacher and disciple meet again. It is really touching. Ghostly heaved a long sigh. No matter what, although he was excited, happy, shocked, and many doubts surged in at this moment, but he was after all no longer that ignorant youth. Very quickly calmed himself down, just that he still could not help but look at Tian Bui, his heart filled with mixed feelings. Tian Bui, too, after the shock, had mixed feelings, but his experience was much more than ghostly. Composed himself, his face turned solemn, turned to that mysterious person shrouded in black gas, and coldly said, "Both of them are also my Qin Yun sect disciples. Since you dare to do these things, Don't tell me you still don't dare to see them? Ghostly was surprised. His eyes first landed on that mysterious person. Obviously, he did not expect that person to be related to Qing Yun's sect, but after a moment, he could not help but be moved. Looked at Tian Bui. His face revealed a complicated expression. And right now, Lu Sweki, who was standing beside, instead revealed a slight smile. Looked at Ghostly, as if feeling her gaze. Ghostly also glanced at her. Lu Sweki smiled sweetly. Tenderness flashed past her eyes, like consolation and also like joy. As expected, that mysterious person coldly laughed twice, pointed at Ghostly, said why he is also considered as Qing Yun's sect disciple. Tianbi resolutely said, "He is my Big Bamboo Valley 7th disciple. It is I, Tian Bui, who said so. So what?" Daoxian, senior brother. Ghost Li's body shook. For a moment, the expression on his face was indescribable, extremely stunned. After a long while, his eyes shifted from Tian Bui to that mysterious person. With some disbelief said, "Reverend Daoxian." That mysterious person laughed. The black gas shrouding his body suddenly rolled up, slowly dispersed downwards, slowly revealing the body above the chest. This person had a long beard touching his chest, his face clear and ancient. If it was not that highly respected, renowned Qing Yun sect head reverend, who else could it be? In this short period of time, Ghostly could be said to be continuously shocked. Right now, seeing Reverend Daoxian's face, couldn't help but took a step back. His heart was in a mess, his mind a blank. And although Lu Sweki was mentally prepared, but when she really saw the face of this person whom she had revered like a deity for many years, she still couldn't help but be shocked. Her face also turned slightly pale. Right now, Reverend Daoxian's expression did not change, but with one look, one could clearly see that his expression was completely different from before. A cold glint flashed in his eyes, without the slightest bit of benevolence and mercy. Ghostly looked at Reverend Daoxian from top to bottom. His brows gradually frowned. At the same time, a sharp glint flashed past his eyes. This person in front of him could be said to be an important person who changed his life. 10 years ago, Qing Yun held Tongtian Peak, that earth-shattering Zhu Xian sword, split Bai Yao Soul, and also split the former Zhang Xiaofan into today's Ghostly. Just that Ghostly deeply understood the depth of Reverend Daoxian's skills. When he entered Ghost King's sect to learn Tian Shu skills, he had long understood that if he only trained in Qing Yun sect Taoism true way and Tian Yin Temple Buddhism supernatural powers, even if he exhausted his entire life's effort, he might not be that Zhu Xian sword formation's match. Just that the more he trained, the more profound his knowledge of skills and supernatural powers became. The hope in his heart instead became increasingly bleak, especially 10 years later. The demon beast catastrophe. Reverend Daoxian made his move again on Qingyun Hill, opened the heaven seal, using the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as the support, defeated the once invincible beast deity. That godlike divine might was already not something a human could match. Just that even in his dreams, he could never imagine that he would meet such a Reverend Daoxian, a person whose entire body was emitting terrifying evil power. Although his cultivation was also unfathomable, but to Ghostly, he seemed to be within reach. On his face, a trace of agitation indistinctly flashed past. Reverend Daoxian suddenly turned back, stared at Ghostly, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. He had presided over Qing Yun sect for no less than 100 years, his name resounding throughout the world. When Ghostly was still Zhang Xiaofan, facing Reverend Daoxian, he really treated him like a deity. Right now, being stared at like that, Ghostly's heart inexplicably tensed up, subconsciously clenched his fists. "You want to kill me?" Reverend Daoxian stared at Ghostly, coldly said. Ghostly did not speak. He only flipped his hand. Green light flashed. The soul-devouring stick had already appeared in his hand. Faint clear glow, mixed with some mournful blood-red color, slowly flowing. Reverend Daoxian, for some reason, looked at the soul-devouring stick in Ghostly's hand. The corner of his mouth seemed to have a mocking smile, then turned his head, faced Tian Bui, also asked the same question. "You want to kill me?" Tian Bui, instead, was extremely straightforward, said, "Yes." "Can you kill me?" Tian Bui snorted, said, "Even if I can't, I have to kill you." Reverend Daoxian laughed strangely, his voice sharp, traveled far, said, "That's right, I've already seen it that year. Other than me and that dead ghost Wan Jinni, in this generation of Qing Yun sect, regardless of talent or courage, you are indeed the first." A trace of sadness flashed past Tian Bai's face, said, "What is the use of saying all these now?" Reverend Daoxian's brows raised, suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "Good, I ask you, why do you want to kill me?" Tian Bai's body shook. For a moment he could not speak. Reverend Daoxian's face, for some reason, had a mournful look incompatible with his current vicious and evil state, but it appeared on his face he was heard coldly saying, "Tian Jr. brother, you want to kill me. Is it for the reason that you have always revered righteousness and morality, justice and the people's heart?" Tian Bui, for so many days, this was the first time he heard him address him as Tian Jr. brother. For a moment, his heart was confused, but then he clenched his teeth, said, "After you joined the evil sect, you committed all sorts of crimes. If I don't kill you, I'm afraid your sins will be even greater." Reverend Daoxian gave a long whistle. His voice seemed to be full of mockery, then stared at him and said, "What a good, righteous, and stern words. Then let me ask you, I wonder if you remember, why I became like this today." Tian Bui was stunned, speechless. Reverend Daoxian snorted, glanced at Anan, who was on full alert, said, "This teacher uncle of yours is not willing to say. Can you tell me?" Anan's face turned even paler, but subconsciously avoided Reverend Daoxian's gaze, remained silent. "That's right, what could I say? Could it be that Reverend Daoxian, 10 years ago for the world's good faction, 10 years later for the common people, did not hesitate to risk his life, drove the Zhu Xian sword formation twice, and even to this state, this cause and effect, right and wrong, good and evil, it was so tangled and difficult to distinguish, heaven's trick, to this extent, in the abandoned morgue. For a moment the morale was seized by Reverend Daoxian. Tian Bui was originally righteous, wholeheartedly wanted to sacrifice himself for justice. But unexpectedly, although Reverend Daoxian joined the evil sect, not only did his cultivation strangely not decline, even his rationality and divine sense was very clear. After a few words, Tian Bai's body trembled slightly, for a moment unable to make a move. Actually, these matters. Not only Tian Bui was clear in his heart, even Anan's heart was like a clear mirror, saw it clearly. If this matter really came up, Reverend Daoxian to the world's good faction had the merit of rebirth. If it was any other day, even erecting a monument for him would not be too much. Just that heaven's trick. This was the result. If Reverend Daoxian was delirious after joining the evil sect and went on a killing spree, even if Tian Bui and the rest were not his match, they would not have to consider too much. But this time Reverend Daoxian clearly asked them a few questions, immediately squeezed them. This world's reason, yet did not know what to do. And at this moment, Ghostly coldly spoke, "The world's common people has nothing to do with me. What kind of merit you have done, I also don't care. I only want from you 10 years ago, that sword that harmed Bai Yao." Before his voice landed, the soul-absorbing stick's green light flourished. Instantly, icy cold air enveloped from all directions, filling up this morgue. A sharp whistle in the air, Ghostly had already maneuvered his magical weapon, heading straight for the entrance. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed slightly, seemed not to expect Ghost Li's skills to improve to such an extent in these 10 years. Looking at his move, the soul-absorbing stick seemed slow, but was actually fast, secretly carrying the force of wind and thunder. Green light flashed. It was Qing Yun sect Tai Ji Xian Qing Wei, and his realm had already broken through Yu Qing realm, mastered Shang Qing's supernatural power. And from Reverend Daoxian's perspective, even in Shang Qing realm, this lad seemed to have reached the pinnacle, indistinctly approaching that legendary Tai Qing realm. Reverend Daoxian saw it. Tian Bui and Lu Sueki, who were standing beside, were both outstanding figures in Qing Yun sect. With this glance, both of their countenances changed slightly, couldn't help but looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Just that Tian Bai's eyes had more surprise. In Lu Sueki's eyes, after the surprise, there was also a faintly discernible disappointment, but then it was overpowered by a burst of joy. The three of them naturally would not know. Ghostly these few years had met with many twists and turns, but there were also opportunities and coincidences. Right now, he was the only one in the world who had mastered Heaven and Earth's #1 extraordinary book, Tianshu. Tianshu's origin was mysterious, passed down since ancient times. The magical powers in it were ever-changing. Looking at it carefully, the world's most flourishing few sects were mostly related to this extraordinary book. Tianyin Temple's various supernatural powers originated from the 4th volume of Tianshu. Evil sects' various strange powers had always originated from Tianshu. And Ghostly alone mastered 4 volumes. His current supernatural powers cultivation could be imagined. Just that although Ghostly was not the same as before, but the Reverend Daoxian he was facing was one of the top figures in the world. To control the powerful Qing Yunju Xian sword formation, he must have mastered Tai Ji Xian Qing Wei to Tai Qing realm, and right now, everyone had truly witnessed his powerful supernatural powers. The seemingly unstoppable, soul-devouring stick, before it reached him, the layer of black gas around Reverend Daoxian had already started to churn rapidly, as if it was being forced by a tremendous force, almost dissipating. And Reverend Daoxian, after the initial shock, recovered, stood still, his right hand suddenly stretched out from the black gas. His 5 slender fingers made a sword gesture in front of him, slashed in the air, pointing like the wind. Where his fingers and palm passed, the same dark green light flashed. In a moment, drew out a yin-yang taiji diagram. Once this yin-yang taiji diagram was formed, it spun incessantly in the surrounding air. Immediately the sound of the wind rushed, the surrounding darkness. Only this diagram shone brightly. In a short while, it had already formed a rapidly spinning vortex in the air. The Soul Devourer arrived with a rumble. That taiji diagram was blocking its way. The two collided. It looked like an unstoppable force of 10,000 caddies. But at that moment of collision, other than a small sharp whistle in the air, there was no other sound. The taiji diagram was forced back 3 chi by the soul-devouring stick, but just this 3 chi distance exhausted all of the soul-devouring stick's attack, powerless to move another step forward, and the dark green light gradually dimmed, actually following that vortex's rotation. Chapter 433. Ghostly with a long howl, his body leapt into the air. Immediately the soul-absorbing stick flashed, flew back. Reverend Daoxian glanced sideways, sneered, pointed with his sword gesture. This yin-yang taiji diagram immediately shone brightly, struck towards that figure in the air. Sharp whistles incessantly in the sky, piercing sounds incessantly. Ghostly's figure appeared and disappeared, like an apparition swiftly flashing. But Reverend Daoxian seemed to have fiery eyes, was not the least affected by Ghostly's strange skills. That taiji diagram in the air continued to pursue Ghostly, and was getting closer and closer. Finally, Ghostly slowed down. The taiji diagram caught up. A cold glint flashed in Reverend Daoxian's eyes. The taiji diagram in the air immediately glowed with dark green light, grew with the wind, for times bigger than before, struck down. Lu Sueki's body shook slightly. Tian Bui, for some reason, slowly nodded his head. The taiji diagram struck down. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed, and then a strange howl, disregarding the taiji diagram in the air. His entire body charged up to the sky. That taiji diagram struck empty air. Ghostly's figure actually disappeared, and the taiji diagram at the same time seemed to be controlled by an external force, dispersed with the wind. And the moment Reverend Daoxian's body flew up, the ground in the morgue courtyard emitted a deafening sound. Within a radius of 2 zhongs, shook violently. The next moment, like an earth dragon roaring out, all of the stones and sand and the deafening sound left the ground. Even that dilapidated house also collapsed at the same time, innumerable wooden shards mixed with the other stones and soil. All of this was immediately swept up by an unknown force into an enormous heavy stone flow. With an astonishing momentum pursued Reverend Daoxian in the air. The offensive and defensive situation in that moment strangely turned around. Just that true Daoxian in the air did not show any fear, watching the huge mud flow which was gathered by Ghost Lee's strange skill. The black energy around him suddenly shook, and then, as if it had spirituality, rolled forward, like an invisible hand pulling it, laid out a 2-chi square black energy wall. In the blink of an eye, the incomparably powerful flow of earth arrived and heavily smashed onto the black wall of chi. This time, it was like a clap of thunder in the sky, and one could vaguely see a few tiny bolts of lightning flashing past. A huge explosion instantly swept across the world, and an invisible but powerful wind descended from the sky like a huge wave. With the black wall of chi as the center, it violently blew in all directions. In an instant, this abandoned morgue was completely destroyed. Everything was crushed by this huge force and blown to an unknown distance by the even stronger wind. Even a few lone trees that stood sparsely nearby, because of this soul-stirring battle, were uprooted. Their branches and leaves were all shed, flying far away. Tian Bui and Anan were not ordinary people, had already leapt up and stood in the air, avoided the sand that rolled over like a current, but the wind in the air was so strong, like knives cutting them. With their skills, they still felt this pain. It could be seen how intense the fight was. However, the situation on the battlefield still changed in the end. The black chi wall seemed weak, but under the continuous flashes of lightning, it slowly pressed downwards. That incomparably mighty earth dragon torrent was also pressed down bit by bit. Ghost Lee's skills had improved, but it seemed like it was still not as good as Reverend Daoxian's 100 years of cultivation. Tian Bui looked at the scene, the incessant sounds of wind and thunder. His eyes also seemed to have thunder rolling. After a few moments of hesitation, he clenched his teeth. The scarlet fire in his hand glowed. Following a loud shout, he became one with his sword and flew towards the scene. Behind him, Anan was slightly stunned, wanted to speak, but stopped. The scarlet fire burned like a raging fire, enveloping Tian Bai's entire body in the fire, extremely dazzling, like a fire phoenix roaring to the sky, just that he looked slightly plump. Just that although his posture was awkward, but Tian Bai's skills were not ordinary. This sword maneuver, even Reverend Daoxian did not dare to belittle it. With a whistle, he moved away, avoiding Tian Bai's sharp momentum. The black air wall instantly dispersed, once again enveloped Reverend Daoxian's surroundings. The huge mud flow in the air paused for a moment, with a sound, as if it lost its support, immediately crumbled and fell, like a rain of mud falling from the sky. A figure flashed past, his face solemn, but without the slightest sign of fatigue. It was Ghost Lee. Everyone saw that round. Reverend Daoxian was indeed well-versed in Taoism. Ghost Lee understood 4 volumes of Tian Shu, but maybe because he had only trained for a short period of time, he was still not Reverend Daoxian's match in terms of skills, but he was almost on par and had the power to fight. Just based on this round, if it was spread out, it would be enough to shake the world and make Ghost Lee famous. Tian Bai's sword pierced the air. The scarlet flame did not weaken, but instead grew stronger. With a twist in the air, like a rainbow streaking across the firmament, turned back, straight towards Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxuan's body swayed, again dodged. At the same time, he coldly laughed and said, "Why? You can attack again. Have you thought about the principles and morals?" Tian Bui coldly snorted, straightened his body, and held his sword horizontally, sternly said, "Your merits are matchless, but you have indeed made a grave mistake. I am fighting. It is for the generations of ancestors' orders. Today, if you die in my hands, I will definitely commit suicide to express my gratitude." Ghost Lee's body shook slightly, glanced at Tian Bui. For a moment he did not understand, but in such a short time, who would explain to him? But Tian Bai's long howl was heard again. The scarlet fire blazed, covering the sky and covering the earth. The momentum was unparalleled. Ghost Lee saw it, frowned, after a slight hesitation, also flew up to attack. 2 experts besieging Reverend Daoxian's cultivation skills, finally revealed without a doubt at this moment. The sword gestures in his hands were either pointing or slashing. At the same time, that layer of dark energy was as thick as ink, as black as lacquer. also ever-changing, able to attack or defend, 1 against 2 in the air, blocked Tian Bui and Ghostly, and did not seem to be in a disadvantageous position. In the fierce battle, Tian Bui, with a mountain-splitting and sea-overturning force, slashed down. The power of it, even someone as strong as Reverend Daoxian had to temporarily avoid it, drifted back 3 chi. Taking advantage of this gap, Tian Bui suddenly seemed to recall something, loudly shouted to Ghostly, "Lao Chi, be careful. He still has Zhu Xian's sword with him." Ghostly's heart immediately turned cold. The power of Zhu Xian ancient sword, he was really engraved in his bones and heart. Just at the next moment, the 3 words Zhu Xian sword in his heart like boiling hot oil, the blood in his body seemed to be boiling. 10 years ago, Qing Yun Hill Peak, that fallen green figure. Instantly, Ghostly's eyes were blood red, with a loud roar, charged up. Each of his moves and skills were all in a stance of risking his life. Tian Bui was shocked, and then seemed to sense something, secretly sighed, and again pursued. Ghostly suddenly like risking his life. Reverend Daoxian for a moment did not expect it. After a few rounds, he was thrown into a fluster by the 2 of them, but his skills were really extraordinary. Facing Ghost Li's level of cultivation, plus Tian Bai's fierce attacks, Reverend Daoxian still tenaciously turned the situation around bit by bit. Although for the moment he could not gain the upper hand, but he did not seem to be at a disadvantage. The more Tian Bui fought, the more alarmed he became. All along he knew this sect head senior brother was really a rare talent. 10 years of cultivation far surpassed himself. This time he took such a huge risk to stop Reverend Daoxian. Mostly because according to the ancestors' last words, after Zhu Xian's sword entered evil, the wielder's skills should greatly decline. Even so, Tian Bui was prepared to perish together. But after the series of fights, Reverend Daoxian's skills only made Tian Bui full of admiration. He even had some doubts. Could it be that his own sect head senior brother had already reached such a high level that Zhu Xian's sword could affect his mind, but not his skills? The fights became more and more intense, Ghostly's attacks more and more frenzied, but although Reverend Daoxian was struggling to defend, but it was still watertight. Instead, he occasionally counterattacked, but each move was vicious. If not for Tian Bai's timely rescue, most likely Ghostly would also be seriously injured. Watching this dangerous scene happening again and again, Tian Bui was feeling anxious and uneasy. A clear whistle suddenly sounded. A white figure floated over. Without any worldly air, blue light flashed. Tianya descended from the sky, propitious vapor rising. Lu Sueki finally joined the battle. With the 3 experts joining forces, the situation immediately changed. No matter how powerful Reverend Daoxian was, he could not fight alone. Gradually, the pressure was like a mountain, gushing in from all directions unceasingly. These 3 opponents, all of them were highly skilled, the weapons in their hands, each one better than the other, and Reverend Daoxian right now was still fighting barehanded, using only his skills to fight against the 3 of them. It was already in astonishing level of cultivation. Just that in the 3 of them, a trace of doubt simultaneously flashed past. That extraordinary and holy, insufferably arrogant Zhu Xian sword. Right now, where did it go? Why did Reverend Daoxian not take it out? And when the 3 of them were gradually suppressing Reverend Daoxian struggling, but in the end still in a precarious situation, a cold glint flashed past his eyes, swept past the 3 of them. Ghostly and the rest were stared at by his eyes. Their hearts shook before they could react. Suddenly, Reverend Daoxian's strength in his hand arrived. Like a raging wave, the 3 of them were shocked, increased the strength in their hands, blocked it. And Reverend Daoxian also took advantage of this fleeting moment. A black color flashed past his face. Left hand as support, right hand vertically in front of his chest, fingers like knives. His mouth quickly chanted a strange incantation. The next moment, a patch of black on his 5 fingers flashed again, dispersed 3 times. The night curtain of the firmament, a tragic world. There seemed to be some voice crying to the sky. That mournful feeling shot up to the sky. The energy surged, the winds and clouds rolled. Ghostly and Lu Sweki could tell that Reverend Daoxian was about to unleash some strange and powerful spell. Without hesitation, were about to attack, just that they had just moved. Suddenly an extremely strange sound, as if something had suddenly cracked, crisply cracked. And this sound came from beside them. A shivering feeling, quietly like lightning, flashed past their hearts. Both of them stopped, slowly turned around. Behind them, there was another short and fat figure who had stopped earlier. Tian Bai's face still retained the previous expression. Just that right now, it seemed somewhat stiff. He was still standing in the air. The Scarlet Flame's splendor was still as bright, but his body was motionless. That extremely strange, like a heart-wrenching and lung-splitting strange sound, was emitted from Tian Bai's body. Chapter 434. Like a voice squeezed out from the depths of his throat, hoarse and sluggish, Tian Bai softly cried out, like involuntarily. His body started to tremble, but very quickly calmed down. Only on his face, that once faintly discernible, indistinct black hair, right now was so thick that it seemed to cover his entire face. Lu Sweki's palms suddenly filled with cold sweat, and at that moment, she finally discovered a perplexity that had been lingering in her mind, a perplexity regarding why Tian Bai suddenly looked chubby. The long robe that seemed tight because of Tian Bai's unexpected weight gain, right now loosened. Very obviously, Tian Bai did not gain weight. His body was the same as before, and the reason why he looked chubby was only because his clothes were too tight, and right now his long robe split from his back, loosened, and also brought the truth, revealed to Lu Sweki and Ghostly. A simple and unadorned sword hilt, revealed from the fluttering robe in the air. It was quietly there, without a sound, stabbed into Tian Bai's back. Ghostly's entire body, for some reason, slowly began to tremble. Even his lips had lost their color and were trembling slightly. Looking at his expression, it seemed like he wanted to shout something, but when the words reached his mouth, there was no sound. The earth-shattering battle just now, just like that, froze. Ghostly and Lu Sweki stared blankly at Tian Bai, as if they had forgotten that there was still a terrifying enemy behind them, Reverend Daoxian. Just that Reverend Daoxian did not make a move to ambush them. His lips only revealed a trace of a smile. An icy cold smile. The palm that was like a knife. The 5 slender fingers suddenly bent. The black gas that appeared out of thin air swirled around the fingertips, floating and sinking, and finally gradually dispersed. And as if resonating with this action, almost at the same time, Tian Bui in the distance made a muffled groan. His body shook violently, as if he was struck by lightning, his head even more abruptly raised to the sky, with a sense of despair. Pa! A low sound. Under Ghostly and Ainan's watchful eyes, in Tian Bui's chest, a sword without a sword tip, like stone but not stone, pierced out, revealing a small part of the sword body. Strangely, Tian Bui did not bleed. Not even a drop of blood flowed out. Immortal Bane, this unparalleled ancient sword, had already pierced through Tian Bai's body. The black gas on Tian Bai's face seemed to have regained a vigorous life. At this moment, completely alive, crazily crawling and scrupulously swallowing Tian Bai's face. And Tian Bai's head slowly drooped down, rested on his chest, following which his body seemed to have lost all its strength. First, the Scarlet Flame, which never left his body, completely lost its light, left his palm, fell from the sky, and following that short and fat body, which had flashed through countless times in Ghostly's memory, swayed a few times, finally could not hold on any longer, fell from the sky. Like a comet which had burnt out, pounced towards its final destination, the earth. Ghostly trembled, his entire body was trembling. He once thought that he was strong enough to face all the misfortunes in the world, but right now, he seemed to have returned to 10 years ago. That despairing presence, like a ferocious beast, once again swallowed him completely. He made a hysterical cry, disregarded everything, and flew down to pursue, towards that falling body, towards that familiar body. His speed was so fast, like lightning and thunder, unstoppable, bringing along a violent gale. The moment before Tian Bui fell to the ground, he caught hold of his teacher's body, which had raised him up. Touch cold, lifeless. This was clearly a body which had been dead for many days, did not even have the basic body temperature. Ghostly hugged Tian Bui tightly. His panting became heavier and heavier. Unknowingly, his face was already covered in tears. Careful! Suddenly, an anxious cry was heard from behind. Lu Sueki's white figure hurriedly flew over, and in the air, Reverend Daoxian's hand gesture drew a big circle. That deep, mysterious incantation instantly stopped. Ghostly, almost instinctively, a trace of alertness flashed past his heart, but he was hugging Tian Bai's hand. The surging grief in his mind actually suppressed his rationality. He did not let go. This body, this person, raised him up from young, passed on his achievements, taught him how to be a man for those 10 years. He had always been looking at this person's back, living, walking, advancing, that voice and smile, every frozen memory scene like a thunderclap hammered in his mind, making him unable to move. How could he let go? Zhu Xian's ancient sword lit up. That light instantly stung his eyes, making him unable to see clearly. The familiar despair from so many years ago enveloped him. In a flash, Ainin used all her strength, rushed over, pounced forward, grabbed Ghostly, borrowing the huge momentum. Both fell to the side. Boom! Like lightning shooting in all directions. Instantly dissipated, the dazzling halo immediately restrained. Zhu Xian's ancient sword mercilessly pierced out of Tian Bai's chest, flew up into the air, arrived beside Reverend Daoxian. A powerful and slender hand stretched over, held the sword hilt. In that instant, heaven and earth darkened. Even the few stars in the distant horizon finally disappeared into the dark clouds. No blood, not even a drop. Ghostly seemed to have lost his soul, at the same time also lost all his senses, woodenly climbed up, tripped and fell to the ground. He struggled desperately to crawl over to Tian Belize. Ainin stretched out her hand to help him, but when her hand was halfway, she froze. She suddenly pounced on Ghostly, pulled him. Her panting was very hurried, like fear emanating from the depths of her heart. You look at Tian teacher uncle's hand. Rumble. In the horizon, a rumble of thunder rolled past. The thick dark clouds in the sky finally started to rain. Just that this rain was actually black. Following the rumble of thunder, the gradually heavier rain, lightning like a swimming dragon appeared in the sky, streaking across the dark firmament. In the soil, on Tian Bai's body, his palm, one of the fingers moved. Ghostly was stunned, but after a moment, the sorrow on his face did not turn into fear. Replacing it was an uncontrollable ecstasy. He shouted loudly, "Teacher!" Then he dashed out, towards Tian Bai, recklessly dashed over. Ainin's face was pale, but her eyes were more rational than Ghostly. But in shock, she quickly stretched out her hand to pull Ghostly, but did not manage to. Only grabbed a piece of his robe. With a sound, tore it off. In the mid-air, Reverend Daoxian, who was standing in the clouds, black gas circled around his body. All of the rain and wind avoided him. His face was ferocious, looking like a demon god, arrogantly watching the mortals below, as if controlling their fate. The Zhu Xian ancient sword in his hand, like stone yet not stone, like jade yet not jade ancient sword body, again flashed a trace of strange light, reflecting on his face, added a few degrees of mournfulness. Ghostly seemed to have seen a glimmer of hope in his despair, ecstatically dashed up, but he did not realize on Tian Bai's face, the black gas not only did not dissipate along with his vitality, instead became thicker. Right now, it had completely covered Tian Bai's face. Just when Ghostly dashed up, opened his arms to carry his teacher and call, Tian Bai's palm suddenly flipped up, instantly infused with supreme power, like a huge hammer, heavily struck on a Ghostly's chest. Ghostly's expression instantly froze. The next moment, his body flew out. Along the way, sounds of cracking were heard. Tian Bai's skills in the world was enough to be proud of. The power of this palm could be imagined. Ghostly was also caught off guard. Immediately, many of his ribs were broken. Most likely his internal organs were all shifted. he suffered heavy injuries. And because he had trained in Tian Shu True Wei, in addition to Tian In Temple Great Brahmin Wisdom automatically protecting his body, he did not lose his life on the spot. Even so, he also flew out 3 zhongs. Instantly his vision turned black. Stars flashed randomly. His chest was in so much pain that he could not even feel it. But in his mind, there was only one voice reverberating. What happened to teacher? What happened to teacher? Ha ha ha! An extremely mournful laughter came down from the sky. Reverend Daoxian stood in the clouds, arrogantly laughed. Didn't you want to perish together with me? Didn't you want to get rid of the scourge for the people? How about it? I'll let you have a taste of this Zhu Xian ancient sword. Ha 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 ha! Tian Boli's body slowly stood up. Although his movements looked a little sluggish, each movement was filled with a strange power. The black gas on his face was surging crazily. Each time it gave people a soul-stirring feeling. Tian Bui slowly stretched out his right hand, suddenly opened his 5 fingers. The scarlet flame celestial sword which had fallen far away immediately lit up. The next moment, automatically flew into his hand. And after Tian Bui held the scarlet flame tightly, he moved his slightly slow steps, impressively walked towards Ghostly, who was heavily injured. The black rain was getting heavier and heavier, also getting more and more urgent. Chonglang, like a dragon's cry, Tianya was unsheathed. Ainan's face was pale, holding the sword horizontally in front of Ghostly, her chest heaving up and down. The rainwater hit her skin, her white clothes covered with dust, but added a few points of desolation. The rainwater hit the ground, turning the soil into mud. Blood seeped out from the corner of Ghostly's mouth, instantly staining his clothes red. Even his voice also became hoarse and intermittent. Teacher, what happened to you? Tian Bui seemed to not hear any sound, and the gale, and gradually turning into a rainstorm, did not have the slightest effect on him. His body only woodenly walked towards Ghostly, who was struggling on the ground, and Anan, whose face was pale and teeth clenched tightly, unhurriedly. Every step carried murderous intent and murderous intent. Chapter 435. Rumble. A thunderclap sounded overhead. Even Reverend Daoxian, who was standing in the clouds, was also shocked. The next moment, his expression suddenly a strange change. That seemed to be a perplexed expression, as if he was in a deep sleep, in between waking up, seemed to have recalled something, but ultimately could not grasp it. For a moment, he was at a loss. As if contrasting with Reverend Daoxian's unusual expression, the strange light that was circulating on the Zhu Xian ancient sword in his hand, at the same time dimmed down. Rumble. The thunderclap, like an enormous hammer, shook the firmament and the world, as if the deities in heaven were also enraged. The earth faintly trembled. The world was filled with wind and rain. In this split second, in that instant, Tian Bai's footsteps suddenly stopped, and the thick black gas that shrouded his face seemed to suddenly lose some kind of support, faded a little, revealing Tian Bai's pair of eyes. An instant. How long was it? The Buddhist said a mustard seed is like a mountain, an instant is eternal. It was the same, but that one breath of time, what kind of instant was it? That pair of eyes looked deeply at Ghostly, watching him struggling in the mud, spitting out blood, calling out teacher 2 words. The scarlet flame light, like a blazing flame. It was reflected in his eyes. That instant, how long could it be? Tian Bui abruptly shook his head, as if using all his strength, found Anan, looked deeply. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The wind and rain howled. Tianya's celestial sword emitted faint blue light, stood in the wind and rain. Anan's gaze at that moment met with Tian Bai's, like a thunderclap, like a flash of lightning, like a violent gale, like a huge wave. She clearly saw that the thing that was surging like a huge wave was staring fixedly at her in those eyes. It seemed to have endless intentions, but in the end, it only turned into silence. In the next moment, Lu Sueki's face was completely drained of blood. Even her lips became almost transparent. Lightning flashed past. Reverend Daoxian's body shook slightly. The perplexed look dissipated. Almost at the same time, the strange light on the Zhu Xian ancient sword again lit up. On the ground, The wind and rain were still howling, but Tion Boli's eyes were once again covered by the surging black gas. His footsteps were heavy in the mud, splashing dirty water in all directions. Step by step, he walked towards his original destination. Dense killing intent. Dense killing intent. Tion, Martial Uncle Tion. For some reason, Lu Swecky's voice became incomparably bitter. Don't come over, please don't come over. Ghostly propped himself up with his arms, looked up, just that his body had only risen halfway when he fell powerlessly into the mud again. The mud splattered all over his face, but he seemed to not feel it at all. He could only raise his head with all his might, looking at the resurrected master walking towards them step by step. The scarlet flames burned fiercely, burning someone's soul and bloodline. In the wind and rain, Tion Bui approached. Ainan's hand holding Eolin Firmus was trembling. Her face was pale and translucent. Master's Uncle Tion. Stop, stop. What answered her was the scarlet flame, celestial sword. The blazing flames struck down from above. Instantly, the rainwater within 3 chi evaporated completely. After Tion Bui was controlled by this mysterious skill, his cultivation skills seemed to advance instead of retreating. Ainan barely raised Eolin Firmus to block. A sharp sound. Her entire body along with the sword was thrown out by a tremendous force, from ghostly like a broken kite, landed behind Tion Bui. Between master and disciple, there was no longer any barrier. Tion Bui stopped, scarlet flame slowly raised, although Ghostly was lying powerlessly on the ground, but his eyes were still wide open, staring at Tion Bui, just that Tion Bai's face was covered in black gas. His expression could not be seen clearly. The wind and rain howled, heaven and earth mournful. Suddenly, Tion Bui roared. Scarlet flame instantly glowed brightly, struck down towards Ghostly. Ghostly did not dodge. In fact, he could not. His mouth was slightly opened, not knowing if he was shouting something, just that that bit of sound was completely drowned in the blazing gale brought up by the scarlet flame. Boom! Above the firmament, another clap of thunder. The mortal world was pierced by a bolt of lightning. That instant illuminated this dark world. Tion Bai's movements suddenly froze. Scarlet flame stopped just 1 chi above Ghostly's head. Ghostly could even clearly feel that blazing flame was about to incinerate him into ashes. But it did not. All of Tion Bai's movement stopped. Scarlet flame's brilliance also quietly, slowly faded away. On Tion Bai's body, from his heart position, a sword tip came out. Flickering with faint blue light, propitious steam rising unceasingly, Tianya's celestial sword once again pierced through Tion Bai's body and heart. The wind and rain like knives struck the figure behind Tion Bui, messy hair sticking to her skin, numerous water droplets sliding down her face ashen, her body trembling. Rumble! In that instant, 3 consecutive claps of thunder in the firmament all exploded beside Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian's body shook greatly. Suddenly his entire body curled up, his face revealing an extremely pained expression. The next moment he howled to the sky, transformed into a stream of black light, like lightning speeding away, leaving this place. On the ground, Ghostly was stunned again, his eyes staring blankly at his teacher's chest, that sword tip that pierced through his chest. No blood. Not even a drop of blood. Dang! Scarlet flame completely lost its light, like scrap metal fell to the ground. Ghost Lee's eyes twitched, his body trembling slightly. Following which, Tion Bai's knees seemed to soften, his body slowly knelt on the muddy ground, right before Ghostly. The black gas on his face was swiftly dispersing, but there was still a faint layer shrouding over it, lingering and not dispersing. Ainan's hand holding Tianya also started to tremble, but she did not hesitate, only closed her eyes. The next moment, Tianya's celestial sword's faint blue glow lit up with its inherent 1,000 years of auspicious energy, bit by bit emitted from Tion Bai's body, at the same time dispersing that layer of black gas, at the same time expanding the wound on Tion Bai's chest more than 10 times. Ugh! Ghostly made a hoarse cry, like a despairing beast, tears streaming down his face, not knowing where he got his strength from, his heavily injured body, leapt up like a fish, pounced on Tian Bui, dragged him away from Tianya, and Tianya just happened to disperse the last trace of strange black gas. Tian Bai's familiar face once again appeared in the storm. His eyes were open, but it was unknown if they had never been closed. Then the corners of his mouth twitched, and he smiled at Ghostly. Anan, who was standing behind him, seemed to have exhausted all the strength in her body, could no longer support her body. Her legs gave way, fell into the muddy ground. Ghostly only glanced at Tian Bai's chest. In his heart, he already knew this teacher who had raised him up had already reached the end of his life, could no longer be saved. Why? He screamed hoarsely. His face was indistinguishable from rain or tears. This time, he was facing Anan. His body struggled in the muddy ground, trying to crawl over to question her. But a pair of trembling hands stopped him. This hand was weak and frail, but Ghostly was immediately pulled back by him. Ghostly panted, his lips trembling. His hoarse voice said, "Teacher, teacher." Tianbui looked at him, his breath like gossamer, as if desperately trying to gather the last of his strength, struggled, and said to Ghostly, "No, don't blame her. Don't blame her." Ghostly stretched out his hand, tightly grasped Tianbai's palm. From that palm, there was only coldness. He could no longer bear it, burst into tears in this stormy night, wailing incessantly. His mouth could only utter those two words, "Teacher, teacher." Tianbui stared at him. The corner of his mouth slightly moved. His voice gradually became low. "Lao-Chi, teacher. I'm here. Ghostly desperately went closer to Tianbui. Tears drop by drop fell on Tianbai's palm. "After I die, you bring my body back to Big Bamboo. Peek, give it to you, your Shenyang." Ghostly desperately nodded, the muscles on his face contorted, his body trembling incessantly under his gaze. Tianbai's breathing became more and more rapid. His voice also became softer and softer. "You have to persuade her. Don't be sad. Don't do stupid things." At the last word, Tianbui suddenly raised his voice, then abruptly stopped, and the palm in Ghostly's hand instantly drooped down. Ghostly was stunned. His body that had been trembling also stopped trembling, frozen on the spot. The bleak cold wind and rain turned out to be so bone-piercing cold, straight into the depths of the soul. After an unknown amount of time, he finally called out in a low voice, "Master." Then his vision turned black, fainted beside Tianbai's body. Chapter 436. Qingyan Hill, Big Bamboo Valley. In the dead of night, only the sound of bamboo rustling carried by the wind softly reverberated in the night sky. The lights had long been extinguished. The Big Bamboo Valley disciples had also rested, only at the back of Observe Silence Hall. There was still a lone lamp, still flickering in the darkness. The night breeze carried a hint of coolness as it blew in through the half-open window, emitting a soft whooshing sound. It also caused the lamp on the table in the middle of the room to sway and flickering unsteadily. A fair hand, gently stretched over, blocked the wind. The fire very quickly stabilized, started to give out light again. Suru sat lazily at the table. The night was already deep, but she did not feel sleepy. The wind outside was still blowing incessantly, hitting against the doors and windows, making light sounds from time to time. Suru stood up, slowly walked to the window, but did not immediately close it, instead looked out. The firmament was like ink. It was the darkest time. She concentrated and listened, just that in this late night wind, there was no sound that she wanted to hear. A faint bitter smile appeared on Suru's face, quietly closed the window, turned back and sat back at the table. She and Tianbui were not people who valued luxury. The furnishings in this bedroom were not much on the table other than a cloth bag. There was only a small round mirror. She took that round mirror over. The next moment, in front of her, a dignified and beautiful lady appeared in that round mirror, her hair like clouds, skin like a young girl, without a trace of wrinkles. She and Tianbui married, cultivated for hundreds of years, only then had this level of attainment, permanent beauty. After looking for a long time, Suru instead sighed softly, put the small round mirror aside, took the cloth bag from the other side, opened it. Inside were some of the most ordinary things, some needle and thread, a piece of cloth, and also scissors, powder. In the mortal world, ordinary housewives usually had these things to make clothes for their husband and children. Suru gently took the cloth, threaded the needle and thread. With the light from that lamp, she carefully sewed. However, as she sewed, under the illumination of the candlelight, her eyes became a little blurred, as if she was a little absent-minded. No one knew what she was thinking about, and her sewing speed also slowed down. Right at this moment, a sudden gust of wind seemed to blow outside the room. With a woo sound, the window that had just been closed was slapped heavily, and in an instant, it was blown open again. A gust of cold wind suddenly rushed in, and the candle on the table was almost blown out by this gust of wind at the same time. Ah! With a soft cry, Suru frowned in the darkness. A sharp pain came from the tip of her finger. With her cultivation, to be injured by a small needle, even she herself felt it was funny, just that for some reason, right now the room was in darkness, being blown by the cold night wind. Suru's mood felt distressed, like a big stone was stuck in her heart. Heavy. She sighed, put down the needlework, and walked to the window. The scenery outside was still the same, just that her husband, who had watched with her countless of times, had left for a long time. After daybreak, maybe she should send Darren and the rest down the mountain to search. Waiting like this was not a solution. Suru thought so. Tion Bai's appearance flashed past her eyes, a wave of worry. Deep into the night, she stared at the night sky for a long time, her lips trembling, not knowing what she was saying. After a long time, she quietly lowered her head, faintly sighed, closed the window. Outside the house, the wind seemed to become more urgent. Majestic Fox Mountain, Ghost King Sect. Similarly, in the deep night, there was also someone who could not sleep, just that perhaps his state of mind was different. Hidden above the blood pool in the deepest part of the mountain, Ghost King and Mr. Ghost stood side by side. Mr. Ghost was still wrapped in black clothes. His expression could not be seen clearly, but Ghost King's face revealed unconcealable excitement and joy. He did not look the least tired from staying up all night. In fact, with Ghost King's cultivation, even if he did not sleep or rest for a few days, it would not be a big problem. And right now his face not only did not show any signs of tiredness, instead indistinctly glowed with red light, full of energy, fully focused on the blood pool beneath his feet. The blood pool that was soaked in countless fresh blood. Right now, compared to the past, there was an obvious change. The four great spiritual beasts were still imprisoned in the blood water. Even the Tautai that struggled with all its might, right now looked as if its strength had been sucked out, listlessly crawling in the blood water, not moving for a long time. And the blood pool, which had always been calm, right now was no longer calm. In the huge water surface, bubbles kept rising from the depths of the blood water. At the same time, bursting sounds were heard, and this speed was no less than several times faster than before, and the number of bubbles also increased. The entire blood pool looked like it was boiling. An invisible force was constantly awakening from the depths of the blood pool. And in this space, the stench of blood was more than 10 times stronger than before. In the air, the core of the four divinities' blood formation, the hidden dragon cauldron, also underwent some changes. The original heavy cauldron seemed to have absorbed a lot of spiritual energy and evil power from the blood pool and the four spiritual beasts, and gradually revealed a trace of red light. And the cauldron, which looked like it was made of bronze, right now revealed a transparent and slightly pale yellow amber color. Looked indistinctly dignified. On the cauldron, those mysterious inscriptions, all lit up like they had regained life, glimmering with a strange light, and the picture in the middle, the four spiritual beasts that were flickering, right now had all lit up, shimmering, the light even brighter than the surrounding inscriptions. Only that hideous demon head in this picture was still dark red like blood, greedily absorbing the spiritual energy from the cauldron. And surrounding the hidden dragon cauldron surroundings, in the sealed mountain belly, there was actually a misty and cloud-like vortex airflow, indistinctly carrying wind and thunder great force, continuously swimming around the cauldron. Even Ghost King and Mr. Ghost, who were standing far away, could still clearly feel This hidden dragon cauldron itself contained terrifying power, and this strange power was still constantly increasing and strengthening. Like Ghost King, Mr. Ghost was also watching the cauldron, but his eyes were cold and sharp compared to Ghost King, less fanaticism, more calmness. Mr. Ghost watched the cauldron for a long time, unhurriedly spoke. Right now, everything is going as planned. It is exactly the same as what the inscriptions on the cauldron say. According to this, as long as the period of 49 days is perfect, it seems the four divinities' blood formation, this matchless formation, will definitely succeed. Ghost King inhaled deeply, his face glowing, his eyes revealed a rarely seen fanatical glint, stepped forward, couldn't help but gave a long howl, said, "Good, good, good. Old man can't wait any longer." Mr. Ghost glanced at him, said, "Sect head, don't be impatient. There will be plenty of time in the future." Ghost King laughed to the sky, abruptly turned around, walked to Mr. Ghost, stretched out his hand, and heavily patted Mr. Ghost's shoulder. Mr. Ghost seemed surprised. A strange glint flashed past his eyes, but in the end he did not move, stood where he was. The next moment, Ghost King's hand patted his shoulder, but there was nothing unusual. He only laughed loudly and said, "Good, good, good." He laughed loudly, extremely happy, and then seemed to recall something. His smile faded a little, solemnly said to Mr. Ghost, "Thank you very much." Mr. Ghost lowered his head slightly, said, "This matchless formation can succeed. It is all sect head's good fortune, and if not for this hidden dragon cauldron, I am also at my wit's end." Ghost King smiled and shook his head, said, "The hidden dragon cauldron is our Ghost King sect's precious treasure, but for many years, no one was able to comprehend the inscriptions on the cauldron. Only you at the end helped me. This is the heaven giving birth to me, to achieve hegemony." Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, said, "Sect head has flattered me." Ghost King laughed, turned around again. His eyes once again landed on the cauldron in the air, radiating boundless radiance. The auspicious air pressing, an ecstatic glint flashed past his eyes again, could not help but laugh loudly again. Mr. Ghost quietly stood behind Ghost King, watching Ghost King's increasingly arrogant demeanor, did not speak a word. Right now, if anyone who knew Ghost King came in, most likely they would be shocked. Ghost King had always been a man of bold vision and introverted, never had such an arrogant expression, but this time in Mr. Ghost's eyes, Mr. Ghost did not show the slightest surprise. Not knowing if it was because Mr. Ghost and Ghost King had seen too much alone, or because he was too scheming, others simply could not tell. Anyway, above the huge blood pool in the hidden mountain belly, in the thick stench of blood, Ghost King complacently plotted the future. That complacent laughter reverberated, gradually enveloping the entire huge cave. And behind him was a quiet shadow, quietly standing. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.